A grand kingdom where royal power dictates destiny. A dramatic judgment was about to unfold. Deep within the vast, imposing marble halls of the imperial palace, court officials stood in silent assembly as a high-stakes decree was delivered from the throne. An outburst of fury, the king declared that he was officially revoking the royal succession rights and ordering an immediate expulsion from the palace grounds. Subject of this harsh banishment was none other than the seventh prince, Noah, who seemed unfazed despite the heavy weight of the decree leveled against him. Instead of despairing, he beamed with pure joy, exuberantly thanking his father and revealing that he had secretly been anticipating this exact outcome all along. Left entirely bewildered by the cheerful response, the king stammered in confusion, struggling to comprehend why anyone would react with gratitude to being exiled. Reassuring his stunned ruler with an easygoing shrug, Noah nonchalantly casualized his own expulsion, pointing out that it only made sense given his supposed incompetence. Attempting to regain his composure, the king explained the kingdom's strict law. While every royal possessed a right to the throne, determination alone meant nothing without revealing a true skill through official appraisal. He emphasized that in this land, every royal successor was expected to learn and manifest the power required to rule properly. Because Noah possessed neither skill nor ambition to become king, the monarch feared his presence would spread damaging rumors, rendering exile the only logical option. To maintain public appearance, the officially stated narrative would be that his succession rights were stripped before granting him the remote Ikatar territory to govern as a frontier lord. As Noah celebrated his new land grant with cheerful enthusiasm, his father could only stare back in absolute bewilderment at his strange phrasing. Suddenly, a furious voice echoed through the hall as Dagwa, the sixth prince and holder of the holy sword skill, burst into the audience room in disbelief. Marching straight up to his younger brother, Dagwa aggressively grabbed Noah, shouting in outrage at his complete lack of concern over losing his birthright. Unbothered by the violent confrontation, the relaxed youth simply endured the harsh shaking, inwardly reflecting on how he had desired banishment from the very beginning. With an exaggerated sigh of disappointment, Noah sarcastically feigned regret over losing the crown, irritating his older brother to the absolute limit. He remained unbothered as his enraged brother lunged, paying no mind to the onlookers' warning that a prince committing fratricide before the king would bring complete ruin to the royal household. Consummated by fury, Dagwa swung his lethal blade with a murder intent that echoed through the hall, aiming to strike Noah down in a single blow. Blinding flash tore through the air as the strike was violently redirected, shattering the force of the assault in an instant. Stumbling past his target, the elder prince found himself completely off balance, his powerful stroke slicing harmlessly into empty space. Trembling with shock and frustration, Dagwa gasped for air as the realization of his missed attack set in. Feigning complete helplessness on the floor, Noah drama-acted his terror, loudly thanking his brother for supposedly holding back and sparing a hopeless failure like him. While the surrounding court murmured in confusion over why the attack stopped, Noah leaned in close to Dagwa's ear, whispering a chilling taunt that shattered the prince's pride. Frozen in place by the whisper, Dagwa could only watch as his younger brother casually stood up and began walking away. In that fleeting moment of the exchange, Noah had effortlessly intercepted a blade faster than sound and tougher than dragon scales, snapping it apart with absolute ease. Refusing to accept the impossible feat he had just witnessed, Dagwa turned back around and shouted in disbelief. Ignoring the outburst, Noah stepped onto a glowing magic circle alongside his feline companion, bidding everyone farewell as he announced his departure to live a life of comfort in his new territory. The cheerful wave and a final parting word, a bright burst of light enveloped Noah completely. As the brilliant light faded, the throne room fell into a stunned silence, leaving the royal court standing in utter astonishment. The onlookers struggled to comprehend what they had seen, whispering in awe about ancient teleportation magic that should only belong to legendary sages. Far away from the royal palace, Noah relaxed inside a luxurious horse-drawn carriage, casually reading a book as his attendant addressed him softly. Listened calmly as his cat familiar, Rory, questioned whether his rights to the royal succession had truly been revoked, quickly reminding the feline not to doubt his overarching plan. Feline companion recalled the strange journey that brought them here, musing over how a legendary hero's third life had come to this point. Cheering with enthusiasm, the prince threw his arms into the air, celebrating that his orchestrated plot of apparent incompetence had finally succeeded, granting him total freedom. Rory watched on with a heavy sigh, exasperated by how utterly thrilled his master became at being labeled completely useless by society. Far from being genuinely incompetent, he was a soul that had reincarnated twice before, having achieved renown as both a legendary sword hero and a master sage in his former lifetimes. Addressing his companion directly, he confirmed that he had indeed lived 2 full lives as a renowned hero before arriving in this realm. However, he vented his frustration with an intense glare, declaring how utterly exhausting and tiresome it was to constantly bear the burden of heroism. He recalled the endless barrage of tedious responsibilities, being thrust into forced monster subjugation quests, targeted by unwanted resentment, and buried under a mountain of nuisance demands. Having endured that grueling lifestyle twice over, he loudly proclaimed his ultimate realization that working tirelessly was simply terrible. He explained his logic, admitting he never anticipated royal succession causing such trouble, which was why he had initially chosen to reincarnate as a prince in a seemingly peaceful world. To escape those royal duties, he had tampered with the magic during his appraisal ceremony, forging outcomes that made him appear utterly talentless, devoid of magic, swordsmanship, or basic intellect. Staring blankly at his master, the feline finally voiced a long-held suspicion, asking if the former hero was actually just a complete good-for-nothing at heart. Rather than denying it, the prince simply grinned and advised his companion not to resent him, pointing out that being a cat meant enjoying a peaceful life anyway. As their carriage rolled peacefully down a dirt road toward their destination, a soft meow echoed from within the cabin. Suddenly, a loud crash shattered the quiet journey, causing the horses to rear in panic as a sudden threat violently blocked their path. He stood surveying the smoking crater where a giant projectile had slammed into the earth, wondering if it was a meteor or a volcanic boulder. Hearing a sudden panicked cry from behind, the young prince turned his head calmly. Beside the wreckage of their carriage, he stood unbothered as Rory floated high above in a state of absolute panic. Floating helplessly in the air, Rory shouted down at him for not giving warning about an attack, but he dryly pointed out that she had dodged the impact faster than anyone using high-grade floating magic. He calmly explained that back in the age of the sword hero, even a young child could cast floating spells, calling her the truly absurd one. The conversation was cut short as heavy, rumbling footsteps echoed across the clearing, catching both of their attention. Turning toward the rising dust, Rory gasped in shock as a colossal shape emerged from the trees. Towering over the landscape, a massive volcano turtle roared, prompting Rory to scream out in terror at the appearance of an S-rank monster. Terrified by the creature, Rory panicked over her sealed devil powers, prompting the young prince to tease her about her priorities in the face of danger. Ignoring their bickering, the giant beast lumbered forward and launched another massive burning boulder directly toward them. As the massive projectile hurtled through the air right above them, Rory screamed in utter desperation. Unfazed by the incoming rock, he raised his hand and activated creation magic to instantly forge a radiant sword. With a single swift slash, a beam of energy sliced through the airborne boulder before it could hit the ground. The giant threat disintegrated into a harmless shower of fine gravel, raining down softly around him as he sheathed his magic blade. Staring in disbelief at the tiny pebbles on the ground, Rory shrieked in shock at how effortlessly he had reduced a massive projectile to dust with a single swing. She continued to protest frantically, arguing that the legendary sword hero should not be used as a standard measure, given how dramatically power levels had changed since his era. But he merely recalled that back in his day, even mid-level adventurers could handle a beast of that scale. As the massive volcano turtle unleashed a deafening roar that echoed across the valley, Noah calmly addressed the monster, scolding it for disturbing the peace with its endless shrieking. The cold, commanding command for the beast to disappear, Noah unleashed a devastating orb of concentrated magic directly toward the giant creature. The immense energy blast enveloped the volcano turtle completely, incinerating the S-rank threat in an instant and leaving behind a cloud of smoke. Trembling in absolute shock, Rory wondered if she had just witnessed some hidden, supreme-tier magic, while Noah casually brushed off her awe as if it were nothing special. Holding a tiny ember in his gloved hand, Noah nonchalantly claimed that his overwhelming spell was simply a basic fireball. Glancing over at their ruined transport, he casually mused that it would have been far better to fly, leaving Rory completely dumbfounded in the background. Upset and tearful, Rory shouted at Noah for taking off using flight magic and leaving her behind on the ground. As they soared high above the mountainous landscape toward their destination, Rory screamed in disbelief at his absurd skill, while Noah drifted along with a vague feeling that he had forgotten something. Looking up at her savior walking away into the distance, she gasped in awe, wondering if she had truly just been rescued. To her eyes, the figure retreating into the light felt like nothing less than a legendary figure reborn. With wide, shimmering eyes, she came to the firm conclusion that he must be an ancient hero returned to their time. After navigating the steep ascent up the hill, Lista arrived at Ein village within the Carter territory. Reassuring the anxious villagers, she promised that they had nothing to fear despite the monsters rampaging once more. It was common knowledge throughout the settlement that an ancient hero had long ago established a formidable barrier magic specifically to safeguard the town. Village elders had always maintained that the barrier would hold, protecting them from the immediate peril posed by the neighboring Albaslav forest. Yet, staring at the ancient defenses, Lista could not help but wonder aloud if such an age-old shield could truly guarantee their safety. Suddenly, an enormous, mountain-like creature burst through the horizon near the village, casting a terrifying shadow over the gathering townspeople. Panic erupted immediately among the villagers as they recognized the monstrous behemoth as a dreaded volcano tortoise, an S-rank threat. The destructive surge of power, a blinding blast, shattered the landscape. Everyone's absolute horror. The ancient barrier that had shielded the settlement for generations crumpled and shattered under the beast's overwhelming force. Despair swept through the crowd as the villagers cried out, realizing that without the barrier, their beloved home and everyone in it would be reduced to nothing more than monster feed. Despite the town's meager resources and the looming disaster at their doorstep, she resolved within her heart that she had to find a way to act and protect the place she cherished so deeply. Stepping forward boldly, Lista declared her intention to draw the monster's attention and slow its march, shocking those around her. Ignoring the desperate shouts calling her back, she sprinted toward the towering threat, hoping that by luring it away, she could buy precious time for the village. She rushed across the rugged terrain. Her footing gave way, sending her tumbling forcefully to the hard earth right in front of the advancing colossal beast. Hitting the ground, she let out a bewildered gasp as she looked up at the overwhelming danger now towering directly above her. She looks past the looming danger and spots a horse-drawn carriage speeding across the distant path. Realizing that unsuspecting travelers are inside the vehicle, panic begins to set in. Ignoring her own perilous situation, she screams with all her strength for the wagon to flee. Before the beast can strike, the threat is eliminated in the blink of an eye, leaving Noah standing calmly amidst the pulverized earth with a flickering ember at his fingertips. Stunned by the miraculous intervention, she clutches her chest in disbelief, wondering if he really just saved her life. She gazes at his retreating figure. She remembers ancient stories of legendary heroes and frantically calls out for him to wait. Meanwhile, back in the grassy field, Rory fumes over being left behind and decides to assume her airborne shape to chase after him. Sudden change in form startles nearby onlookers, sending screams of panic echoing through the trees. Far from the commotion, Noah arrives at the grand estate of the Carter territory, admiring the peaceful countryside location as the ideal setting for his quiet retirement. Just as he reaches the front gate, a sudden pang of doubt stops him in his tracks as he tries to remember what he forgot. Before he can piece it together, a colossal winged beast swoops down from the sky, shouting at him in utter frustration. The towering creature berates him mercilessly for callously abandoning a maiden back at the battleground. Completely bewildered by the massive monster standing before him, Noah simply tilts his head and asks who it is. Exasperated, the beast explains that she was forced to take her true devil form to fly after him, scolding him for failing to recognize his own companion. She angrily threatens to end his life for leaving her behind. Noah turns with a cold, terrifying glare that instantly chills the air between them. He easily terrified the colossal beast into submission with just a single glint in his eye, forcing her to immediately rethink her hostility and claim she had always been his loyal apprentice. Trembling in fear, the dragon could only whimper under her breath about how scary he truly was. Observing the strange sight, the young girl expressed her amazement at how such a massive dragon froze in terror before him, while he simply wondered who she was. She introduced herself as Lista from Ein Village, offering her deepest gratitude to him for defeating the volcano tortoise and rescuing her town from total destruction. Hearing her gratitude, he blinked in utter confusion as the implications of her words began to settle in. Without warning, the grateful maiden threw her arms around him, hailing him as the legendary new hero who had tamed a monster dragon, while he found himself completely flustered by her sudden closeness. Attempting to piece together the situation, he pondered how a resident of Carter territory could possibly identify him as the secret hero. Bluntly shattering his lingering hopes, the dragon blurted out that everyone had actually discovered his true power on his very first day in the region. Overwhelmed by intense shock, he collapsed in despair, watching his dream of a quiet, peaceful retirement instantly crumble to pieces. Furious, he rounded on his companion, accusing her of ruining everything by bringing the child here and exposing his genius identity. Transforming back into her small, cat-like human form with a soft poof, she hesitantly prepared to explain the situation. She insisted that people had been aware of his extraordinary talents for a long time, leaving him thoroughly dumbfounded. She reminded him of his past actions, such as the time a dangerous swarm of monsters flew directly toward the capital city. Recalling the incident, he remembered attempting to use concealment magic so he could eliminate the sleep-disrupting monsters unnoticed while still half asleep. However, his concealment magic had completely failed, leaving the entire night order watching in stunned disbelief as he slaughtered the horde in his sleepwear. He listened in utter disbelief as his companions highlighted his array of grand feats, noting that neither the king nor his foolish brother had possessed the wits to see through him. Terrified by the comparison, he nervously wondered if his own intellect was no better than that ridiculous father-son duo. Overwhelmed with admiration, the young maid clasped her hands in deep reverence, welcoming him with all her heart as the extraordinary new hero of the Carter territory. The overwhelmed prince flailed his hands in panic, desperately trying to halt her romanticized outburst. She fixed him with an intense, gleaming gaze. He recoiled in sweat-drenched panic, feebly protesting that he was truly just an incompetent and unremarkable individual. She dismissed his excuses without a second thought, insisting that a master of his caliber had no reason to act so humbly and singing his praises louder than ever. So, in a matter of moments, his meticulous master plan for a peaceful and effortless retirement dissolved into complete and utter ruin. High above the grand mansion, his anguished scream resounded through the air, lamenting the absurd turn of events that had shattered his quiet life. Leaning back with a heavy sigh, Noah pondered how his quiet life had spiraled so completely out of control. His original plan had been simple: feign utter incompetence, get banished from the royal castle to a distant frontier, and enjoy a peaceful retirement. Instead, Lista proudly announced that she had finished cleaning the entire mansion. He silently lamented revealing his true power to the very first villager he encountered. He questioned why she was still there instead of returning to her village. She dropped to her knees, passionately insisting on staying to repay her life debt. Flustered, she stammered that any deeper devotion would have to wait until nighttime, leaving him utterly baffled by her misunderstanding. Gently trying to set boundaries, he reassured her that she really did not need to exert herself so intensely. However, she wildly reinterpreted his words, convincing herself that as a noble lord, he simply wished for everyone's happiness, leaving him incredulous at her twisted logic. Taking a deep breath to compose himself, he realized that since only Lista knew of his true strength, no one else in the realm would actually believe her exaggerated stories. Seeing an immediate opportunity, he resolved to demonstrate his supposed incompetence directly to the remaining mansion staff. Pushing open the heavy wooden doors, he stepped forward into the main hall, with Lista following close behind. Standing inside was Sebastian, the head butler of the Carter household, who formally introduced himself to his new master. Recognizing the head butler as the key figure who managed all the staff, he greeted him casually, eager to make a terrible first impression. Sebastian openly expressed his disdain, confirming that the rumors of his rudeness were true, which secretly delighted the young prince. Butler went on to list every derogatory title given to him, labeling him a failure of the royal family, an idiot, and utterly incompetent. While Lista scolded the butler for his blatant disrespect, he celebrated internally, thrilled that he could seamlessly maintain his facade of uselessness. He tried to quiet his attendant as she passionately declared to the head butler how he had saved her village from a devastating volcano tortoise. The elderly butler dismissed her claims as ridiculous fairy tales, scoffing at the idea of a lazy lord accomplishing such a feat, which secretly delighted the young prince. Striking a grand pose, the butler declared that the only true master he recognized was the previous ruler, Lord Manhwa Carter, a name that struck the prince as sounding thoroughly incompetent. Outraged by the disrespect, his attendant asked if he was truly comfortable keeping such a man around, but he reassured her with a nonchalant smile, even offering that she could return to her village if she preferred. Turning back to the butler, he reasoned that it was completely natural for the veteran servant to distrust an inexperienced noble sent to a desolate territory, a point the butler readily agreed with. Butler reaffirmed his stance with an unyielding look, resolute in his disdain. The butler's complete shock, the young prince bowed deeply and expressed heartfelt gratitude, realizing he could leverage the old man's open hostility to project an image of utter incompetence to the entire estate. Enthusiastically giving a thumbs up, he vowed to play the part of a useless ruler to the absolute fullest, eager to learn the ropes while maintaining his perfect cover. The head butler vehemently rejected his gratitude, suddenly wondering with a chill if this seemingly foolish prince might actually be a formidable instrument of the king. Shouted after the departing prince, insisting he would never get along with him, while the small white cat rested quietly nearby, observing that the dramatic exchange had been utterly pointlessly chaotic. Outside the grand mansion, quiet returned to the estate as the sun shifted across the sky. Meanwhile, in a dark cavern far from the manor, hooded figures gathered in secret, discussing rumors about the territory's new lord. Smirking under their cowls, the shadowy figures noted that the new prince was reportedly useless, mocking how this distant land seemed to serve as a dumping ground for incompetent trash. Convinced that no threat remained to oppose them, their leader declared that their dark scheme could proceed without hindrance, ironically thanking the foolish prince for making their task so easy. As the sinister conspirators vowed to claim the human realm for themselves, an impending crisis quietly loomed over the young prince and his companions. Standing before the assembled staff of the estate, the senior butler announced the arrival of their new lord, Noah Carter. The rumors of his dubious reputation preceded him, leaving the servants whispering in anxious anticipation. Relaxing in an unbuttoned coat with little care for decorum, the young noble introduced himself boldly as the incompetent prince, surprising everyone present. The cheerful wink, he offered a nonchalant greeting, while behind him the attendants murmured among themselves, deeply bewildered by his bizarre demeanor. Adjusting his glasses in disbelief, the butler tried to process the surreal introduction, while the maid beside him wondered if the tales of his incompetence were actually true. Deep down, he relished the lack of admiration from his staff, savoring the peaceful freedom that came with low expectations. After being urged to dress properly, he casually revealed his intention to appear even more incompetent, leaving his staff utterly baffled. Suddenly leaning forward with intent, he called out loudly to capture the undivided attention of everyone in the hall. Proclaimed an immediate corporate restructuring of the estate, sending a wave of panic through the seasoned retainers who feared losing their positions. The wide, mischievous grin, he explained that true incompetence lies in firing the most capable subordinates. His advisor questioned if he could even recognize who held actual talent among the gathered workers. Looking outward, he extended his arm and gestured directly toward the crowd standing before him, single-handed pointing out the most senior figures, including the primary maid and veteran butler. He abruptly announced their termination on the spot. The veteran butler protested vehemently, insisting that they were the most qualified individuals present, but he merely shrugged it off, claiming his intuition told him they were obstacles. The gloating smirk, he admitted he simply felt like firing them without any valid reason, staying true to his incompetent act. Left behind in total shock, the senior staff stood motionless, unable to fathom the bizarre rationale behind their sudden dismissal. He had just exposed the hidden intruders, shocking the horned fiends who struggled to comprehend how their true demonic identities had been so easily uncovered. The elderly butler questioned why demons would disguise themselves as simple household servants, while the demon leader demanded to know how this new lord had unmasked them. Nonchalantly explained that identifying a demon is as simple as evaluating the total amount of magic power they possess. Demon leader recoiled in disbelief, astounded that someone could gauge their precise magical capacity with a mere glance. Questioned about the danger, the young prince casually wondered aloud if having demons as employees was really such a bad thing after all. Furious at such ignorance, the demon snarled that it is common knowledge across the realm that demons are the natural enemy of humanity. Meanwhile, the small white familiar chided the young lord for skipping his fundamental demonology classes back at the royal castle. Sparing over the situation, the prince realized that firing his high-capacity servants had unexpectedly created a massive disaster. Maid wailed in distress, foreseeing that her master would now be famously branded as the eccentric lord who spots demons instantly. While the maid expressed admiration for his sharp perception, the demon commander fumed in humiliated rage, refusing to allow their grand scheme of conquest to be ruined by a child. The demon erupted in a furious aura, declaring the situation utterly unacceptable. Hulking up into a massive, muscular form, the beast roared his intent to slaughter everyone present on the spot. Before the giant could strike, the young prince calmly stepped directly into his path, placing a single hand on the monster's chest. Instantly, an immense pressure crushed down on the demon, paralyzing his body completely under an overwhelming, crushing weight. Exuding a terrifying aura from behind his darkened gaze, the prince cheerfully suggested that they all learn to get along from now on. He watched impassively as the demon commander let out a terrified shriek, crashing through the upper balcony window to escape into the night. Draped in theatrical distress, the young prince cried out, asking why the creature was fleeing, while his white cat companion dryly noted that anyone would run after such a terrifying display of force. Whispers quickly rippled through the gathered household staff, where Noah saw a misunderstanding. The servants saw a master who had routed a demon threat in the blink of an eye. Adoration washed over the maids' faces, their eyes glittering with unbridled admiration as they swooned over their new lord's unbelievable prowess. Their doubts entirely shattered, the staff cheered in unison, declaring their complete loyalty and proclaiming that the Carter territory possessed an incredible future under his leadership. His feline advisor playfully congratulated him on gaining a devoted cult of followers. The overwhelmed boy flailed his arms, desperately begging everyone to calm down. Instead of calming the crowd, his frantic protests only fueled their fervor, driving the entire staff to bow down in reverence before him. Amidst the celebration, the head butler Seabass stood in quiet contemplation, reflecting on how even the former lord had failed to uncover the demon spies hidden among their veteran staff. Turning back to the young prince with stern dignity, the elder butler declared that despite this victory, Noah had yet to truly earn his full approval. Unbothered by the stern warning, the young lord cheerfully leapt toward the old man with affection, sending the usually composed butler into a flustered panic. Outside, the moonlight illuminated the newly shattered wall of the Carter mansion, a subtle reminder of the chaotic and challenging journey that lay ahead for the estate. Noah inquired about the village's protective barrier, seeking confirmation from Lista. She affirmed the situation, explaining that while she had gone to retrieve her luggage from Ain village, concerns had arisen regarding the deteriorating barrier. She added that she had moved into the mansion without asking because of these troubling developments. Sebastian sharply criticized the young prince for his utter lack of awareness regarding the events unfolding within his own territory. Unbothered by the scolding, Noah warmly thanked the old butler for keeping him informed, while the surrounding attendants expressed disbelief at how friendly the prince remained despite the harsh reprimand. Continuing his explanation, the elderly butler noted that the Kader territory bordered a treacherous region known as the Abysmal Forest, making the village's protective barrier essential for survival. He openly questioned why anyone would choose to live in such a perilous place, leaving Noah silently contemplating the sheer danger of their surroundings. As they discussed the ancient hero who had originally created the barrier, Lista warned that remaining within the village would soon become impossible if the degradation continued. Noah pondered the legend of the hero while acknowledging the grim reality that the magical shield was steadily weakening. Calm rationale, he pointed out that any barrier naturally deteriorates over time without a continuous source of magic to sustain it, concluding that its eventual collapse was inevitable. Impressed by his swift deduction, Lista marveled that Noah had uncovered the truth behind the barrier's decline when even the royal court magicians had failed. Beside them, Rory reacted with dramatic exasperation at how effortlessly the young prince analyzed complex magic. Rory cheered in amusement as Noah dismissed the spell as overly simplistic, while the floating familiar erupted in frustration, demanding why Noah refused to accept that magical advancements of the past were far inferior to his own superior knowledge. Shortly after, word spread among the villagers, who gathered in hushed whispers to observe the young man who had newly become their lord. Addressing the gathered villagers directly, he introduced himself with casual humility as Noah Carter, the incompetent prince, before turning his attention to inspecting the visible cracks fracturing the barrier. Anxious townspeople explained that a previous attack by a volcano tortoise had severely damaged a section of the barrier, forcing them to take turns keeping watch while relying entirely on the weakened shield to survive. Determined to ease their fears, he solemnly swore on his blood that he would repair the barrier himself, leaving the onlookers gasping in hope and astonishment. Leaning in close, Rory whispered in utter disbelief, questioning why he would make such a confident claim when he had previously mentioned pretending to be incompetent and intentionally messing things up. He slyly explained his calculated strategy, noting that by raising their expectations first, his intentional failure would create a far greater impact, prompting the cat familiar to ask how he could possibly fail even further. Ignoring the familiar's doubts, the young lord stepped forward toward the damaged magic barrier, instructing everyone to simply watch what he was about to do. Smirking with absolute confidence, he prepared to unleash a fraction of his true power to address the crisis. He unleashed a surge of magic power toward the barrier, realizing that without a protective wall, the villagers would be in dire jeopardy. Rather than mending the structure, he decided to completely shatter the ancient force field instead. Sudden destruction of the barrier left the surrounding villagers utterly shocked and panicking. He merely offered a playful, unbothered apology, admitting he thought he could fix it, but made a mistake instead. His attendant stepped forward to smooth things over with the crowd, while he whispered a quick apology for making himself look incompetent. He dramatically declared to the crowd that his actions were completely intentional, leaving the villagers stunned. Continuing her explanation, she claimed he urged them not to rely on an ancient hero's barrier from the past, then struck a confident pose, announcing that he would personally eliminate every monster in the region. Declaration shocked both the villagers and the young lord himself, who had not expected such a spin on his blunder. Instead of growing angry, the villagers marveled at his reliability, convinced he broke the barrier solely to protect them directly. As the crowd cheered his name in adoration, he stood bewildered by the village's bizarre, overwhelming worship. Celebration was cut short when a villager suddenly pointed toward the horizon, spotting something dangerous approaching. Realizing the protective barrier was gone, a massive horde of wild monsters immediately began advancing upon the unprotected village. Desperate to escape the burden of high expectations, he decided to charge into the monster swarm and feign defeat. With an intimidating aura, he dashed straight toward the oncoming horde of beasts. It charged forward intending to throw the fight, but to his utter disbelief, the approaching horde of monsters panicked at his sight and fled in terror. Observing the spectacle, Linda and the surrounding onlookers erupted into passionate cheers, marveling at how mere presence alone could strike such fear into the beasts. Left entirely speechless by the unexpected outcome, he could only stare in shock while his feline companion let out a weary sigh at his side. Recalling the recent destruction of the ancient barrier, he realized that unleashing an excessive amount of magical power had residual consequences. He reasoned that because monsters were naturally sensitive to latent magic, the lingering aura surrounding him had scared them away. Before he could clarify, Linda grandly declared to the crowd that his immense magic made him a terrifying threat to monsters, leaving him utterly baffled. She continued her theatrical speech, explaining that instead of merely rebuilding a barrier, he was personally taking on the task of chasing monsters away forever. With dramatic flair, she thrust her hands toward him, presenting him to the awestruck villagers as their grand protector. As the crowd listened intently, he desperately wished to interrupt and stop the wildly escalating misunderstanding. Ignoring his silent distress, she proudly proclaimed him as their fantastic new lord and ultimate savior, driving the spectators into admiration. Villagers burst into unanimous chants praising his name, while his cat slyly noted that no one around him possessed a shred of common sense as he facepalmed. Meanwhile, far across the region in the royal kingdom of Gatanaiga, the sixth prince grit his teeth in intense anger. In the royal throne room, officials reported that both the knight commander and the chief court mage had resigned, followed by a wave of knights and mages. The advisor broke the news that the mass exodus was due to everyone believing there was no point in serving a kingdom without its true light. The minister tentatively suggested bringing the banished prince back. The enraged ruler slammed the desk, furiously refusing to admit that exiling him had been a mistake. Bellowed in furious denial, refusing to accept that banishing his brother was a mistake and insisting that the exiled prince was merely incompetent. Before his tirade could continue, a serene voice echoed through the hall, addressing the throne with calm composure. Caught off guard, the king turned toward the unexpected visitor entering his audience chamber. It was Lady Cerdius Fuan Graham, a prominent daughter of one of the kingdom's greatest noble families. She walked gracefully down the center aisle, her posture immaculate as she approached the elevated throne. Stammering in embarrassment for his outburst, he offered a quick apology and questioned why she had arrived early, noting that their scheduled marriage meeting was still far off. Without a moment's hesitation, she gently yet firmly requested the formal dissolution of her engagement. He recoiled in utter disbelief, demanding to know her reasons, fully aware that keeping the powerful Graham family bound to the royal house was vital. She pointed out with soft clarity that her original betrothal had been arranged specifically with Prince Noah. Flustered, he argued that while Noah was banished, they were meant to discuss transferring the engagement to him instead. She flatly refused his proposition, her expression unyielding. She explained that with Noah exiled from the realm, she possessed no remaining obligation or desire to maintain ties to the royal family, leaving the king sputtering in shock. She turned to leave. He rushed after her in desperation, begging her to reconsider, but she coldly declared that her heart belonged entirely to Noah. Sudden realization washed over the prince. Noah had never formed bonds with other noble women simply because Sarah had always stood by his side, monopolizing his presence. Feeling a profound sense of relief after finally voicing her devotion, she walked out of the hall while he pleaded in vain for her stop. She looks down with utter disdain, making her stance crystal clear. She refuses to allow herself to be tied to someone she views as incompetent, coldly stating that she would sooner slit her own throat than remain engaged to him. She turns her back and walks away. The prince slumps to his knees in the grand corridor, shattered by her total rejection. Looking up at the open sky, her parting words linger. His complete inability to comprehend her true feelings is the ultimate proof of his incompetence. Across the kingdom, Prince Dagwa, along with his royal father and siblings, despairs in agony, frantically screaming in frustration as he wonders how his entire life has unraveled so spectacularly. Buried under an overwhelming pile of paperwork, Noah vented his frustration over how every minor action he took was constantly overanalyzed and given some grand, hidden meaning. Hovering nearby, Rory nonchalantly suggested that he simply surrender to the burden. Every rumor had spun out of control, from claims that monsters fled the moment he appeared, to assertions that the mansion staff were secretly spies he had brilliantly uncovered. Exasperated by his endless complaining, the small companion barked back, pointing out that his current predicament was entirely due to his own foolishness. She argued that admitting third-rate incompetence would solve his problems, but he adamantly refused, declaring that claiming he could do something only to fail miserably would broadcast his incompetence even more. Sighing at his logic, she noted that no matter what he did, people would always assume there was a deeper motive behind his choices. Shifting her attention to the desk, she picked up a document left behind by Sebastian regarding the village's ongoing reconstruction plans. Reports detailed how the town suffered severe damage when the barrier broke, leaving them desperately lacking the manpower needed for repairs. She questioned why he didn't simply use his instant repair magic. He scoffed, declaring that fixing everything himself would only increase his future workload. Examining the proposal further, an idea suddenly struck him as he realized how the situation could be turned to his advantage. Dressing in his royal coat to head outside, he refused to elaborate on his scheme, cryptically telling her that his plan remained a secret. Left behind to handle the logistics, she pondered whether hiring workers from the Commerce Guild or seeking aid from acquaintances would solve their severe shortage of funds and manpower. As the carriage approached along the path, she wondered who could possibly be arriving at such a crucial moment. Suddenly, the carriage ground to a halt as its magical propulsion vanished, prompting her to step outside to investigate the disturbance. Before she could react, a cold blade was pressed against her shoulder as an armed assailant ambushed her from behind. Bound tightly with heavy ropes, she found herself surrounded by a group of crude bandits who gloated over her fine clothing and eyed the carriage's cargo. Bound tightly, she panicked as Noah casually suggested forcing these criminals to do their administrative labor, completely brushing off her alarm at how easily the bandits had ambushed them. Noah smoothly declared that making these thugs work was merely good management, leaving the bandit leader utterly dumbfounded by his calm audacity. Calling out to their chief, the surrounding thugs directed his attention toward their newly captured prisoner. Staring intently at her tied-up form, the leader blurted out in awe that she was extraordinarily beautiful. Convinced of his own absurd theory, the bandit accused Noah of being a wealthy aristocrat who had spent a fortune to buy such a stunning girl, leaving her dumbstruck by the wild assumption. Having looted all the valuables from the area, the gang cheered enthusiastically, deciding to haul the captive girl along with the rest of their plunder. She was hoisted over a bandit's shoulder. She pondered transforming into her true form to slaughter them all, but Noah quietly instructed her to stay put so he could resolve things safely. Delivering a swift forehead flick with just a single finger, Noah launched the heavy bandit chief, flying backward, terrifying the rest of the gang. Screaming in horror, the rogues watched helplessly as their leader hurtled through the air from the impossible impact. Landing smoothly right beside her, Noah casually reached out to unravel her bindings. His expression turning stern, he demanded to know what vile intentions the thugs had planned after carrying her off. Tears welling in her eyes, she looked up at him in relief as he stood between her and the remaining hostiles. Openly scoffing at their trashy motives, Noah voiced his utter disdain for their idiocy, while she looked on with a deadpan expression, declaring that the foolish farce ended right here. He stepped forward to confront the entire gang alone. He offered them a stern warning to surrender quietly if they valued their lives. But the enraged bandits refused to retreat and charged directly at him. Moved like a shadow, swiftly catching and binding the charging bandits before they could even react. In a blink of an eye, the assailants found themselves hopelessly tied together, staring in utter disbelief at the young prince who smiled back at them. Shortly after, Noah transported the captured group back to the estate grounds, presented the bound men to his bewildered staff, suggesting these desperate individuals could serve as much-needed labor for the village's reconstruction, provided they were properly compensated, declaring that the entire reconstruction project would be placed in their hands. He left Seabass and Linda completely stunned by the absurd proposal. Seabass immediately protested, questioning the sanity of entrusting the village's future to lawless outlaws. Noah remained steadfast, asking if his butler doubted his judgment and firmly stating his belief in the men's capabilities, while Linda watched on in quiet worry. In truth, Noah secretly, smugly celebrated, convinced that handing responsibility to criminals would ruin his pristine reputation. Turning back toward the captive bandits, he was met with the unexpected sight of the men weeping profusely. Overflowing with emotion, the former bandits praised Noah as a remarkably merciful savior. Prince blinked in utter confusion, caught completely off guard by their tearful gratitude. Bandit leader sobbed aloud, hailing Noah as his master for granting fallen men a second chance at life, while Noah and Linda stood frozen in bewilderment. Men explained that they had only turned to crime after losing their livelihood and homes, driven to banditry purely out of desperation to survive. Revealing his true background as the former head of the Commerce Guild, Panther eagerly pledged to take on the reconstruction work, leaving Seabass astonished to realize who these men actually were. Seabass recalled rumors of high-ranking guild workers arrested by corrupt nobles, asking Noah if he had known their true identities all along, though a bewildered Noah insisted he had no idea. His calculated scheme to tarnish his own standing had completely backfired, leaving Panther to rally the former outlaws with fiery enthusiasm, declaring that the tools in their hands were hammers and nails rather than weapons for their long-awaited labor. Men let out a unified, thunderous roar, raising their fists in total devotion to the construction task ahead. Staring at the cheering crowd, he could only grimace in sheer disbelief as his plan to ruin his reputation crumbled once more, while his maid looked on with light-hearted amusement. Meanwhile, his butler quietly marveled at his young master's uncanny ability to resolve labor and security crises simultaneously, though he reassured himself that the territory still faced countless insurmountable obstacles that no single leader could overcome easily. Moments later, an ornate, heavily decorated carriage clattered through the gates and came to a halt right in front of the estate where the group stood waiting. Sudden appearance of such a luxurious conveyance left him utterly bewildered, his eyes widening in confusion beside his equally surprised companion. The polished carriage door swung open and a graceful figure stepped down onto the path, apologizing for the sudden visit and offering assistance. He blurted out a shout of sheer astonishment upon recognizing the unexpected guests. Standing before him was Lady Saradius along with her companions, offering a warm and elegant greeting to the astonished. Noah shouted in sheer astonishment, demanding to know why the three figures had suddenly appeared before him in the countryside. Recognizing their faces, he realized that these individuals were prominent acquaintances from the royal castle. Theta, the former royal knight commander, stepped forward and proudly announced her devotion, moved by Noah's noble determination to aid the suffering villagers, leaving Noah completely baffled as to when they had ever agreed on such a thing. Beside her, Riza, the former court magic instructor, greeted him casually, prompting Noah to question why someone who despised the countryside would travel to such a remote region. She revealed that she had ventured out simply because Noah was no longer present at the castle. She dramatically claimed to follow the guidance of the god of shadows. Noah could only sigh in dismay at the sudden influx of eccentric and troublesome companions. Saradius chimed in, explaining that she had discovered the lost pair on her journey and brought them along, believing they would prove useful to Noah. Gently addressing Noah, she expressed her affection, teasingly objecting to being called a mere acquaintance when they were a married couple who had pledged their lives to one another. Sudden declaration sent shockwaves through the group, leaving everyone gasping in disbelief, while Noah buried his face in his hand from sheer embarrassment. Sebastian marveled internally at the extraordinary gathering, realizing that the most powerful noble house, the legendary knight commander, and the realm's greatest magic instructor had all converged upon the Carter territory. Linda and her companion watched in awe, deeply impressed by Noah's incredible capacity to forge connections with such elite figures. Noah urged them all to return home, arguing that high-ranking nobles and famous knights had no business staying in a rural estate, though his companions remained unconvinced. Theta and Riza adamantly refused to depart, declaring that they were determined to be of service and would not tolerate being brushed aside. Saradius smiled warmly, emphasizing that a marquis, a powerful knight, and a master magician had united solely to assist Noah in his cause. Observing their unwavering allegiance, Noah resolved himself to accept their presence, realizing that their loyalty to him was already absolute. He suddenly announced to everyone present that they would be settling things with a duel, flashing a confident grin as he explained that a complete shift in strategy was necessary. He reasoned that by orchestrating this contest, he could demonstrate his own apparent incompetence while allowing his talented companions to display their formidable prowess to the watching villagers, shifting public perception. Meanwhile, gathered villagers murmured among themselves in disbelief, questioning if the young lord truly intended to battle both the former knight commander and the master instructor simultaneously. Stepping forward gracefully, Lady Serdius volunteered to preside as the official judge over the contest, taking charge as a crowd of villagers looked on. Ground rules were laid out clearly. Each contestant had to enter the treacherous forest, hunt, and retrieve the most powerful beast they could find within the strict time limit, with failure to secure a monster resulting in immediate disqualification. The dramatic declaration, the official hunt commenced, sending the competitors leaping into motion. Unexpectedly, Lista produced a magical broadcast microphone and cheerfully announced her self-appointed role as live commentator, completely catching her master off guard. Holding the microphone high, she eagerly began reporting on who had taken the early lead. Darting through the dense forest at blistering speed, Knight Commander Theta surged ahead into the deep woods. Confronting a colossal serpentine monster, he drew his blade with resolute knightly pride, determined to give everything he had for his lord. Concurrently, Ryza maneuvered through the shadows with lethal precision, ready to strike her chosen prey. The single swift slice, Theta carved through both the giant monster and the surrounding trees, leaving the spectators gasping at his raw physical strength. Deep within the shadow of the canopy, Ryza unleashed her specialized dark magic, weaving arcane power around her target. The formidable dark arts manifested in full force, demonstrating the true capability of a shadow magic master. She unleashed her ultimate spell, calling forth the devastating force of a Nova strike across the battlefield. The resulting magical blast exploded into a colossal plume of smoke and fire, shaking the very ground beneath them. Behind the safety of a magical barrier erected to shield the spectators, the surrounding villagers cheered in awe at the sheer display of power. Observing from a distance, Noah silently approved of how well everyone was standing their ground, deciding it was time for him to take action as well. Meanwhile, Lista enthusiastically announced into her magical microphone that Noah had finally made his move, swooning over his refined stance and walking posture. Startled by her booming commentary, Noah shouted out in frustration, demanding to know who had handed the broadcasting device to Lista in the first place. Realizing that being watched meant he could not make an obvious move toward incompetence, Noah began wandering randomly through the woods, leaving Lista frantically searching for his location. Once he had put sufficient distance between himself and the spectators, he paused among the rocky crags to prepare his strategy. He reasoned that incompetence would be judged by the weak nature of the monsters he defeated, making his goal clear. The confident grin, he declared to Adam that they would simply hunt down the absolute smallest fry they could find, specifically targeting a simple slime. As he wondered aloud whether slimes even inhabited this deep section of Hell's forest, an unexpected creature suddenly rustled in the foliage nearby. Right on cue, a small slime peeped out from behind the grass, promptly pointed out by Noah as the remarkably weak target he needed. However, upon closer inspection, Adam caught sight of the creature's strange appearance and blurted out that this particular slime was solid gold. Scooping the soft, shimmering organism into his hand, Noah recalled his former life as a hero when he had encountered slimes of various rare colors. Curious about their next step, Adam tilted his head and asked what Noah intended to do with such an unusual specimen. He watched in utter disbelief as Noah nonchalantly held up his catch, announcing that he had already finished off his target, a harmless slime. Young Prince explained that he used instant death magic to eliminate the monster cleanly in one blow, leaving his companion utterly stunned by such high-tier shadow magic being cast so casually. The creature exclaimed that almost nobody in this world could cast high-level shadow magic, Noah merely tilted his head, noting that it was considered standard knowledge in his previous life. Concluding that returning too early would invite unwanted attention from his overzealous allies, Noah decided to find a comfortable spot in the wilderness to take a quiet nap. The magical feline attendant collapsed to the ground in total exhaustion, baffled that anyone would dare sleep inside a deadly, monster-infested region known as Hell's Forest. Much later, Noah finally emerged from the forest, prompting a weeping Lista to call out in relief upon spotting his return. Distraught, Maid wailed dramatically about how terrified she had been for his safety, while Noah offered a sheepish apology for causing her such anxiety. Fabricating a plausible excuse, the prince insisted that he had simply been so absorbed in battle that he lost all track of time. Observing the performance, his small companion smirked internally, predicting the exact moment everyone would ask about the mighty monster he slayed, only to hear him confess it was just a slime. Stepping back into the main gathering area, Noah called out a greeting, asking if Theta and Ryza had already finished their respective hunts. Before him stood the two formidable warriors, proudly posing in front of immense mountains of slain legendary beasts. Ryza cheerfully declared that she had taken down 15 ancient dragons, while Theta calmly reported adding 5 of the massive creatures to her own body count. Turning smoothly to Noah, Lady Sarah politely requested that he show everyone the grand monster he had hunted. With grand dramatic flair, he unveiled a tiny, shimmering slime resting on a pillow, leaving the gathered nobles and attendants in stunned, speechless silence. With an overly bright grin, Noah gleefully embraced the awkward silence, confident that returning with a single slime would successfully cement his public reputation as an incompetent lord. It presented what seemed like an ordinary slime despite spending so much time in the dangerous forest, prompting whispers among the crowd about the creature's strange, faint sparkle. Before the onlookers could dismiss the result, Sarah stepped forward, calling for patience as she examined the shimmering orb with wide, stunned eyes. Holding the creature gently, she revealed its true identity. The Slime King, the notorious king of gluttony, said to inhabit the depths of Hell's Forest. The crowd erupted into utter disbelief at the announcement, realizing the rare gleam of the legendary monster sitting right before them. Whispers spread rapidly through the observers, recalling lore that this tiny apex beast possessed enough power to devour 5 ancient dragons whole. Taking full advantage of the revelation, Sarah embraced him tightly and formally declared his complete victory, leaving him utterly baffled by how his attempt to lose had backfired. Vista gushed with absolute adoration, reaffirming that he alone was worthy to rule the territory as the surrounding crowd burst into synchronized cheers for their young lord. As the crowd sang his praises, he could only sweat nervously alongside his cat companion, realizing with despair that his casual stroll had accidentally resulted in yet another overwhelming trial. One quiet afternoon, life continues peacefully at the grand estate of the Carter territory. Outside the sunlit windows, the estate grounds remain serene as members of the household go about their daily routines. Deep within the estate's courtyard, companions gather together in casual conversation, enjoying the gentle atmosphere of the day. Inside her study, Sarah Diaz relaxes with a good book, taking in the rare, quiet moment. Nearby, Noah slumps lazily in his chair, surrounded by piles of study materials, while his companion rests beside him. Observing the calm, the small white cat reflects on how lively and full of energy things have become around Noah. Yet far beyond this tranquil home lies the archives, a vast dimensional realm containing all the knowledge of creation, accessible only to those chosen by the goddess. In that sacred space, the white dragon Rory had stood guard over the ancient sanctuary for more time than could be remembered. Resting quietly amid the ruins, the great dragon kept a long, solitary vigil. Till one fateful day, the fabric of the dimensional barrier began to ripple. A light portal manifested in midair, and out popped a young 6-year-old Noah, casually stepping through the rift and marveling at the endless rows of books. Emerging directly before the colossal dragon, the young boy stood unfazed by the creature's immense size. With a cheerful smile, he casually remarked on how impressively large the white dragon was. Stunned by the intrusion, Rory gaped in sheer disbelief at the sudden appearance of a small child in the sacred archives. Rising to its full, imposing height, the mighty dragon demanded to know the identity of the intruder standing so boldly before it. It stood unfazed before the guardian, leaving the ancient entity to wonder who this child could possibly be, given that he possessed neither the blessing of the goddess nor the title of a sage. Driven by its solemn duty, the colossal demon declared its absolute mission as a servant of the prohibited books, to mercilessly exterminate any intruder. The furious roar that shattered the silence of the archives, the beast unleashed a devastating wave of magical force directly at its target. Immense energy detonated across the stone floor, obliterating everything in its path with violent shockwaves. Debris and ancient texts were hurled through the air as the blinding flash consumed the area where the young boy had been standing. Standing tall among the floating pages, the demon proclaimed its identity as Rory, one of the 7 demons crafted by the goddess, boasting that its magic overloads living cells with hyper-regeneration until they rupture and die. Yet, as the smoke cleared, the young prince simply brushed off his shoulders, waving his hands in annoyance because dust had gotten into his mouth. Towering guardian gaped in sheer comedic disbelief, its jaws dropping at the impossible sight. Reeled from the impossibility, unable to comprehend how a child could take the full brunt of its lethal mana and casually walk out as if nothing had happened. Unbothered by the creature's existential shock, the boy turned around smoothly to address the giant beast. Examining his own hand, he pondered the nature of the magic, casually observing that it seemed to blend creation and destruction simultaneously. With effortless mastery, he recreated the exact same complex spell atop his fingertips, offering a simple demonstration while pointing out that it was actually rather dull. Terrified and completely overwhelmed, the ancient dragon shrieked, demanding to know what kind of monster stood before it. The child offered a calm reprimand, reminding the creature that basic etiquette requires one to state their own name first before asking another's. Looking down at the fearless boy, the dragon could only whisper in utter bewilderment, asking if he possessed no fear of its menacing presence at all. Sweat dropped in utter bewilderment as the young prince nonchalantly admitted he had simply figured out how the magic worked and saw no reason to be afraid. Reflecting on his past, the dragon recalled living as a feared deity whom mortals either revered or avoided before he became the guardian of the archives. Smiling brightly, Noah admitted that being viewed with such casual familiarity was a completely novel experience for him as well. Set up properly, the massive winged creature formally introduced himself as Rory, the demon tasked with protecting the sacred library. Curious about the boy's arrival, Rory questioned how he managed to reach such a deeply hidden domain. Noah casually explained that while exploring the castle, he discovered a dimensional tear in space-time and simply forced it open, leaving the dragon utterly stunned. Rory pointed out that while such a rift allowed access from other worlds, ordinary mortals would normally perish attempting to traverse space-time. Ignoring the warning, the young prince sprinted eagerly toward the library structure, thrilled by the prospect of ancient books. Enraged by the intruder's audacity, the demon dragon roared loudly, commanding the child not to touch the sacred texts with dirty hands. Terrified that his fundamental purpose as a guardian was being compromised, he resolved to eliminate the intruder. Spreading his massive wings, the ancient guardian reaffirmed his sacred duty to exterminate anyone who threatened the library. With terrifying speed, the beast lunged forward, unleashing a lethal strike aimed at obliterating the boy. Colossal claws slammed into the ground, shattering the surrounding stone and creating a cloud of debris. Completely untouched by the explosive strike, Noah effortlessly leaped clear of the destruction, landing with supreme composure. Looking up nonchalantly, he advised the guardian to be careful with his wild attacks, lest he damage his own precious collection. He listened intently as the white beast declared that the surrounding books were fully protected by magic, advising him to worry about himself instead. Smirking at the revelation, the young prince realized he no longer needed to hold back. With the assurance that the sacred library was safe from harm, he decided he could afford to exert a bit more of his true power. Unleashing a surge of shadowy, oppressive magical tendrils that flared around him, the sudden display of overwhelming force caught the monster entirely off guard. He hurled massive orbs of dark energy directly into the creature, causing explosive blasts across the chamber. Though the archive's protective magic absorbed the structural shock, the demon gasped in dismay at the sudden turn of events. Preparing to settle the battle once and for all, he offered a quiet apology before triggering a massive, radiant ceiling circle beneath the struggling beast. Extending his hand forward, he declared that regardless of whether his opponent was an ancient demon born from forbidden texts, no one would be permitted to disturb his peaceful life, driving the spell to its absolute completion. The blinding magical light dissipated. A heavy silence settled over the quiet rows of archived books. In place of the towering white beast, a diminutive cat-eared girl sat slumped among fallen pages on the stone floor, utterly bewildered by her sudden transformation. Clutching her head in disbelief, she shrieked in terror as she realized what had just occurred. She flailed around him in a furious frenzy, demanding to know what trickery he had performed to reduce her mighty form to such a tiny, helpless body. She demanded how a mere child could possibly bind an ancient entity. He calmly explained that he had bound her immense magical powers away. With a confident smirk, he reminded her of his true identity, proudly introducing himself as Noah, the seventh. Noah announced his return with a cheerful wave, stepping effortlessly into the mystical library. The cat-eared guardian looked up in quiet astonishment, noting that this sacred sanctuary was far beyond the reach of ordinary mortals. He casually explained his clever method, revealing that by leaving traces of his own high-tier teleportation magic, he could easily bypass normal barriers and return whenever he pleased while flipping through a bound volume. Settling comfortably onto the floor, the young prince found himself completely captivated by the peculiar sequential art forms known as manga. Leaning in close beside him, she proudly explained that the vast archive contained stories collected from across alternate dimensions. Observing him intently, she felt a wave of relief wash over her, amused that instead of seeking dangerous, forbidden magic, he was simply relaxing with fine literature. Looking up with bright, curious eyes, he asked if she had any personal recommendations, prompting her to immediately offer one of her favorites. She quickly gathered a full stack of bound volumes, eagerly presenting the complete collection for him to read. Grateful for the suggestion, the young prince beamed with excitement as he prepared to borrow the entire stack. As he prepared to step back through the portal, he offered a fond farewell, promising that he would return again soon. Watching him depart, a gentle smile softened her expression as she realized he truly intended to make this a regular visit. Yet deep down, she acknowledged that maintaining an overly solemn and formal tone felt entirely out of place for their growing rapport. Her composure instantly shattered into a furious shout upon noticing sticky food smudges smeared directly onto the pristine pages of her precious book. Panicking under her fierce scolding, he frantically wiped the pages clean while stammering out apologies for his carelessness. Reunited over the open pages, he burst into dramatic tears over a heartbreaking plot point, earning a nod of absolute approval from his companion. Eagerly pointing out another work by the same author, she beamed with delight as he praised her impeccable judgment and stories. Found himself embroiled in a heated debate over literature, as his companion sharply shouted back that he was the true fool who failed to understand real quality. Passionately defending his favorite story as the author's absolute masterpiece, he was met with equal fervor from the young guardian, who mocked his taste as utterly dreadful. Eager to settle the matter, he presented his top 3 picks, prompting her to grudgingly admit he possessed some discernment before offering to share her own favorites. With an exuberant shout, she proudly displayed her prized collection of otherworldly volumes for him to inspect. After examining her choices, he had no choice but to concede that her selected volumes were truly remarkable. Despite his praise, the playful argument continued as both stubbornly insisted their personal selections were superior. Realizing how much time had passed, he announced that he needed to head back home, causing her demeanor to instantly shift into quiet melancholy. Looking down with a somber expression, she softly asked if he couldn't stay just a little longer. Gently explained that he couldn't cause worry back at the estate, knowing he would face endless scolding if he lingered any further. Looking around the grand library, he extended an unexpected invitation, asking if she would like to step outside with him. Though she claimed it was impossible due to her duty as the archive's protector, he reasoned that no sealing magic held her bound and offered to set alarm spells to guard the room in her stead. Turning to her with a warm smile, he questioned the purpose of remaining isolated in this lonely place forever. Her heart heavy with hesitation, she felt a wave of anxiety at the mere thought of the world beyond the library walls. Dark memories resurfaced of a time before her assignment here, when she was a beast admired by humans, yet terrified of the realm outside. That ancient admiration had gradually curdled into bitter hatred as humanity ultimately turned against her, casting her out as an enemy. She had desperately tried to run away, consumed by the universal fear of being rejected and feared by others. Because of this, being assigned as the protector of the archives brought her immense relief, freeing her from the terror of human hatred. She had believed she would never want to step outside again, safe from further pain, until Noah reached out with a gentle offer to venture forth. Overwhelmed by conflicting emotions, she stood frozen and speechless before him. A sudden outburst of panic. She yelled at him to shut up and not get arrogant simply because he was human. She declared that as the strongest demon created by the goddess, a mere human could never truly understand her pain. Screaming in frustration, she told him she hated him and demanded he leave the archives forever, even as an internal voice protested her own cruelty. Deep down, she realized these harsh words were wrong and not what she truly wanted. In response to her harsh rejection, Noah quietly turned and began walking away, leaving her watching his receding figure in silence. Looking down at her trembling hands, tears welled up at her eyes as she wondered why she had pushed him away. Silence once again blanketed the endless rows of bookshelves in the empty library. She sat huddled alone against the cold floor, swallowed by regret and loneliness. Suddenly, her senses tingled as she recognized a familiar aura returning inside the archive domain. Realizing that Noah had come back, she sprang to her feet and rushed down the corridor. Filled with newfound hope, she resolved to apologize for her behavior and step out into the world alongside him. She sprinted forward with a sharp cry of refusal, determined to halt whatever intrusion was taking place. Standing among the towering bookshelves was a mysterious, hooded elder with tentacle-like facial features, chuckling to himself as he confirmed he had finally reached the sacred archives. Raising his arms in exultation, the intruder declared his grand ambition to seize all the world's knowledge contained within the legendary repository. Confronting him immediately, the young guardian demanded to know who he was and how he had managed to bypass the sanctuary's defenses. Recognizing her as the guardian, the intruder mocked her incompetence, pointing out that she had failed to realize the barrier surrounding the land was steadily weakening. Her eyes widened in sudden realization, remembering that her power was currently sealed away by Noah, leaving her far more vulnerable than usual. The intruder laughed disdainfully at her attempts to protect the archives alone, prompting her to furiously command the lowly monster to stay away from the precious books. Dismissing her as an incompetent guardian, he asserted that it was actually her who was outmatched and getting away from the situation. Before she could react, creeping tentacles suddenly lashed out and bound her tightly, lifting her into the air while she squirmed in protest. Strained and helpless, she gritted her teeth in frustration, realizing how powerless she was while sealed, as the intruder approached a shelf and reached for a tome, provoking her to shout in warning. Pausing mid-reach, the intruder picked up a colorful book and stared at it in confusion, perplexed by the unfamiliar concept of manga. Outraged by what he found, the intruder scoffed in utter disbelief, furious that a repository of supreme knowledge housed mere childish entertainment that only fools would read. Casting the manga aside in disgust, he declared his desire for true power, grimoires capable of breaking magical limits and obliterating entire nations, rather than useless trash. Hearing him insult the story she cherished, the bound girl lowered her head and quietly interjected, asserting that those books were far from worthless. With quiet conviction, she explained that during her long, solitary days in the archives, it was not the forbidden magic or powerful grimoires that brought her comfort, but rather those very stories that connected her heart to others. She continued to scream defiantly, demanding that the intruder apologize to the authors and stop mocking manga. But the shadowy, octopus-like creature merely glared before deciding to end her life. Brutal tentacles constricted around her body, tearing through her clothing as she groaned in agony under the overwhelming pressure. As consciousness slipped away, she feebly called out for Noah to save her, just as the beast prepared to deliver the final, fatal blow. Suddenly, Noah materialized through high-tier teleportation magic, cutting down the intruder in a flash of lethal force before it could even comprehend his arrival. Catching her gently as she collapsed, he held her safe in his arms while the defeated creature crumbled into dust, asking if she was unhurt. Looking at him with wide, tearful eyes, she asked if he had truly come to rescue her, though he nonchalantly claimed his arrival was mere coincidence. He explained that he had simply returned to the archives because he was curious to read the rest of the manga series he had started earlier. She began to respond about the greatness of manga. No one noticed the sudden shift in her expression and asked what was wrong. Overcome with emotion and relief, she suddenly threw her arms around him, clinging tightly to his neck as she cried out his name. She confessed through her tears that because he had departed so abruptly before, she feared he would never return and that she would never see him again. Gently reassuring her, he quietly promised that he would never abandon her like that. Clarified that the only reason he had been absent for a while was simply because he was away on a short family trip. He added that he had actually tried to refuse the trip so he could stay behind and read manga, but his family had insisted he attend. Reaching into his coat, he pulled out a wrapped box with a decorative ribbon and called her name to get her attention. The soft expression, he presented the gift to her, explaining that he had bought it during his travels, thinking it would suit her perfectly. Little Spirit looked on as Noah offered a bright, cheerful smile, expressing his genuine gratitude to her for keeping the manga safe during the attack. Overcome with emotion, teardrops began to pool in the young girl's eyes as she absorbed his warm appreciation. She suddenly leaped forward and wrapped her arms around him, embracing him tightly in a moment of pure relief. Newfound determination shining in her eyes, she declared that she would go with him from now on, to which he enthusiastically agreed. He still questioned if it was truly all right for her to accompany him, but he reassured her while explaining his plan to set up a protective barrier so no intruder could ever slip in unnoticed again. He went on to explain his personal philosophy. Since she had recommended so many wonderful manga to him, he simply could not accept her generosity without giving something equal in return. The dramatic flourish and a confident grin, he promised that just as she shared her world with him, he would share countless exciting stories and adventures of his own in return. Eager and full of joy, she agreed enthusiastically as they stepped through the glowing doorway together, marking the moment the demon of the archives officially became the prince's apprentice. Sometime later, as they sprinted through the estate, she suddenly burst out with news that a mysterious mineral vein had been discovered in the territory, leaving him completely bewildered as to what had gone wrong this time. She teased him relentlessly about his previous chaotic magical mishaps, recalling how his last fireball had pierced straight through a bloody bear's nest, while he frantically protested his innocence. Watching the lively duo from above, the little cat spirit released a quiet sigh at their familiar antics, knowing that amidst all the chaos, many more grand adventures, recapping recent events, a massive deposit of precious ore was discovered within the bloody bear's nest, the very lair destroyed by Noah's powerful fireball during his previous ordeal. Krista enthusiastically announced that deep within the untamed nest, a vast vein of high-grade mithril ore had finally been uncovered. Noah reacted with total bewilderment, exasperated that fame and fortune seemed to fall into his lap once again without him lifting a finger. As they discussed the immense value of mithril and how rare it was, Sebastian interjected to point out the practical realities facing the territory. Sebastian explained frantically that the surge of new applicants and newcomers arriving daily was rapidly draining the territory's financial reserves. Puzzled by this sudden influx, Noah questioned why so many people were suddenly desperate to relocate to their land. Out in the streets, devoted followers had gathered from far and wide, eager to catch a glimpse of the young prince whose reputation continued to skyrocket. Meanwhile, Lista handled the recruitment duties, though her devotion to Noah often distracted her from the mounting workload. Pressing the issue, Sebastian reminded Noah that resolving their financial strain remained their top priority, leaving the young lord feeling cornered. Sebastian sternly pointed out that since the local residents found the vein, Noah couldn't claim it as his personal achievement, a fact Noah readily admitted. And asked why they shouldn't just reveal the vein to the public, Sebastian cautioned against leaking such vital information prematurely. Noted that if Lady Sarah, whose family oversees the Ministry of Commerce, learned of the mithril, its market value would soar, though managing the situation presented immense risk. Understanding the stakes, they agreed that the mithril needed to be moved quickly before secrets spilled out into the open. Realizing Sebastian was his main ally in navigating this administrative crisis, Noah turned to him with a decisive plan forming in his mind. The sinister grin, he instructed Sebastian to immediately summon the absolute most untrustworthy merchant in the realm. He heard the carriage pull up outside, noting with a smirk that the individual they had called for had finally arrived. Continuing his explanation, he pointed out how their territory was suddenly drawing immense attention. Having recently uncovered valuable mithril ore, his plan was simple. Intentionally invite a notorious merchant with the explicit hope that the swindler would attempt to cheat them out of it. If an infamous crook managed to swindle a lord out of rare mithril, news would spread instantly, cementing his image as an utterly incompetent and naive ruler, a reputation he desperately sought to cultivate. Still, he wondered if a truly corrupt merchant actually existed in the realm, which was precisely why he had tasked his loyal butler with summoning the merchant with the absolute worst reputation available. With absolute confidence in his ability to read people, he prepared to welcome the deceitful guest, eager to let the man set his sights on a seemingly easy target. Right on cue, the heavy doors opened as the butler announced that he had brought the requested merchant into the young lord's presence. The butler hesitated, warning that their guest possessed quite a startling appearance, prompting curiosity right before the shrouded figure nervously offered a greeting. Lowering his hood, the visitor revealed his green, wrinkled face and pointed ears, introducing himself as Sabrina Echegwaya. The entire room froze in utter disbelief, shocked to realize that the merchant standing before them was actually a goblin. Adjusting his stance, the old butler explained that after researching reputations across the entire kingdom, this particular individual matched the description of the most heavily maligned merchant. While the small companion questioned how a monster could possibly work as a traitor, the young prince examined the situation and quietly smiled in approval. Without a moment's hesitation, he cheerfully announced that the merchant was hired, leaving everyone in the room utterly dumbfounded. As the goblin bowed tearfully in gratitude, the prince admitted that the name itself sounded undeniably suspicious and villainous, making him the perfect choice for the job. His companion tried to object due to the merchant's monster heritage. He brushed off the concern entirely, declaring that outward appearances were meaningless compared to genuine skill and reputation. Overwhelmed by such unexpected acceptance and respect, tears welled up in the goblin's eyes as he choked back his emotion. Overwhelmed by emotion, Echegwaya wept tears of gratitude, admitting that no one had ever spoken to him with such kindness since his transformation. Seeing the merchant's intense devotion, Noah offered warm encouragement, silently hoping that placing high expectations would somehow guarantee the merchant's ultimate failure. Handing over a gleaming pendant, the young prince presented it to Echegwaya as a simple token of their new friendship, which the merchant accepted with deep appreciation. Adam watched the exchange in utter disbelief, mentally screaming as he recognized the item not as a mere exorcism trinket, but as something far more dangerous. As Noah walked away, he reasoned to himself that protecting Echegwaya was necessary to prevent his overarching plans from falling apart if an adventurer were to eliminate the merchant. Meanwhile, Echegwaya inspects the given item closely, holding it reverently as if it were a divine holy relic. Time passed, and focus shifted back to the grand estate of the young prince. Adam sat frozen in utter shock, stunned by the sheer absurdity of the unfolding situation. Standing before a massive mountain of gold coins, Noah gasped in disbelief, marveling at the insane wealth that threatened to shatter the world's economy. Surrounded by reports and piles of treasure, he demanded to know what on earth Echegwaya had done, while the butler calmly explained that selling the mithril had brought immense success. The elderly butler glanced toward the entrance, announcing that Echegwaya had already arrived in person to report. Strikingly cute young girl strutted into the room, introducing herself as Sabrina Echegwaya. leaving Noah completely bewildered by her appearance. Adam shrieked in shock at the dramatic transformation, while Saburina merely giggled and offered to explain everything. Curtsying politely, she revealed that putting on the necklace Noah gave her broke her curse and restored her true form prior to being turned into a goblin. Noah reacted with wide-eyed surprise, processing the revelation that the merchant had been cursed all along. Saburina explained her embarrassing past, detailing how corrupt merchants had cornered her and cursed her into a hideous goblin, forcing her to trade under terrible conditions until Noah saved her. She beamed with overwhelming gratitude, praising Noah for ignoring her former monstrous appearance, choosing to trade with her, and ultimately freeing her from the terrible curse. Now restored to her true identity, she declared her intention to return to the Jinnu company, reclaim her former appearance, and withdraw her funds while continuing to conduct business in his domain. Mention of the legendary organization left Noah stunned, while Sebastian recognized it instantly as the wealthiest merchant guild in the world, confirming rumors that one of their top figures had mysteriously gone missing. Overwhelmed by the revelation, the elderly butler collapsed in utter shock upon realizing that the missing elite merchant was none other than Saburina herself. Meanwhile, the young prince slumped in despair, inwardly lamenting how his plans to appear incompetent had backfired into yet another massive, unwanted success. As he wallowed in defeat, Lista looked on in awe, her heart touched by what she believed was his boundless kindness in lifting the curse. Inspired to spread the word of his heroic deeds, the young maiden envisioned inspiring others to embark on paths of light, while the prince recoiled in sheer panic at her rising enthusiasm. Surrounded by mountains of gold coins, he cried out in anguish, desperately wishing to rid himself of the territory that only brought him more endless fortune and fame. Far away from the prosperous land, dark clouds loomed over Karanostia, the ominous domain of the Demon Lord. Deep within the Grand Gothic Hall, reports reached the throne regarding the new hero, Noah Carter, sparking discussions among the shadowy rulers on how to deal with this unexpected threat. Stepping into the light with an authoritative presence, a mysterious horned figure answered the call, signaling the arrival of a dangerous new player in the unfolding conflict. Wandering through the quiet corridors late at night, the small white creature paused as he noticed a light still glowing from one of the estate's rooms. Peering inside, he overheard the servants confirming that their master had already retired to bed and was sleeping soundly. However, far from turning in themselves, the group of devoted allies had gathered around a table to launch a late-night strategy session on how best to support their lord. Watching the intense atmosphere from afar, the little feline realized with a sweat drop that he had stumbled upon a gathering of total fanatics. Servants debated passionately about their lord's recent seclusion, convinced that whenever he isolated himself, he was orchestrating something truly incredible. Bickering escalated as the demon girl claimed her dark magic allowed her superior insight, prompting skeptical retorts from the others. Amidst the petty squabbling about who truly understood their master's mind, the atmosphere grew increasingly chaotic. Silencing the room, the noblewoman clasped her hands thoughtfully and declared that no one understood their lord's true thoughts better than she did. She grandly asserted that his mind was consumed with grand strategy regarding the future of the entire territory, though the watching cat knew full well he wasn't thinking about that at all. Intrigued, the head maid pressed for details, asking what specific grave concerns plagued the Carter lands in the near future. Noblewoman outlined the geographical peril, pointing out that their lands bordered the treacherous forest of death and the demon realm, keeping the domain in constant fear. She emphasized that so long as the demon lord remained alive, true peace would remain an impossibility for the region. Hearing this analysis, the surrounding attendants gasped in realization, connecting the dots to what their master must be plotting. Dramatic flair, she announced her wild conclusion. Their lord was secretly devising a master scheme to eliminate the demon lord once and for all. As the room burst into swooning praise over his supposed heroic brilliance, the cat simply sighed internally, knowing their master didn't even realize a demon lord currently existed. She suddenly felt a wave of clarity, even as her companion argued that his supreme strength meant he could never lose to the demon king, leaving them both puzzled as to why he remained isolated in his chambers. Closing her eyes in deep thought, she pondered how someone possessing power granted from the heavens could have no intention of invading foreign realms, making his retreat all the more mysterious. Suddenly, the young maid gasped as an epiphany struck her, claiming she had finally understood his true motive. She earnestly explained that if their master were to march off to invade the demon realm alone, the entire territory would be left completely defenseless against outside threats. Hearing this realization, the surrounding group cheered in complete agreement, convinced they had unlocked the secret behind his inaction. Summarizing the tactical predicament, the noblewoman deduced that to save the land, he had to slay the demon lord, but doing so meant leaving his people vulnerable unless a solution was found. Spurred on by this logic, both the lead knight and the chief mage vowed never to be dead weight again, fiercely arguing over which faction was truly worthy of guarding the realm in his absence. The knights and mages began bickering over who would be most useful to their lord. The noble lady smiled softly, believing she now perceived the master's grand master plan. She concluded that he had deliberately delayed his campaign, waiting until the local forces grew strong enough to hold the fort so the populace would not live in fear. Claiming her dramatic theory aloud, she asserted he was using the rivalries among his followers to force everyone to grow stronger before his departure, while the small demon cat looked on in utter disbelief at their wild assumptions. Completely convinced by the noble's speech, both the knight and the mage beamed with renewed determination, eager to meet the legendary expectations placed upon them. As the girls declared their burning loyalty and love for their leader, the small feline familiar clutched its stomach in sheer stress over their runaway madness. Realizing that the situation had spiraled completely out of control, the small demon panicked as the absurd misinterpretation swept through the entire house. Sprinting down the grand hallway as fast as his little legs could carry him, he desperately sought to reach his master's quarters to warn him. Bursting through the doors, a panicked follower implored their prince to act immediately, reporting that the entire citizenry had been worked up into a frenzy. He clutched his cushion tightly, shouting at the top of his lungs that he had officially decided to become a total shut-in and would refuse to do anything ever again. His angry outbursts echoed beyond the quiet estate late into the night, as he declared that he simply did not care about whatever consequences might follow. Few peaceful days passed over the mansion without further incident. However, as he stepped outside with his feline companion, the unexpected sound of loud, dramatic weeping caught them both completely off guard. Looking down, he was stunned to find a figure prostrated on the ground, sobbing uncontrollably and wailing in utter despair. To his absolute bewilderment, the formidable demon lord herself was bowing low before him in tears, leaving him completely unable to comprehend what bizarre chain of events had led to this moment. Noah was completely stunned as he stared at the young demon king, unable to comprehend why she was bowing down before him in absolute tears. Hours earlier, within the vast throne room of the demon lord's domain, Karanostia, a skull-masked advisor delivered a grave update to Demon Lord Hold. The advisor detailed how the Knight Order Commander and the lead mage had entered the service of the new Lord, Noah Cater. He added that they had discovered a rich vein of ore, amassing wealth beyond what the lordship even knew how to handle. He continued his report, explaining that the spies sent to infiltrate the previous lord's domain had been exposed and subjected to severe trauma, rendering them completely incapable of undertaking any future missions. With alarming certainty, the advisor warned that the new lord, Noah, was planning the total destruction of the demon lord's kingdom, prompting a quiet acknowledgement from Hold. Overwhelmed by the dire news, her big dark eyes welled with tears as panic set in. She burst into frantic sobs, crying out in terror about what they should do, terrified that her entire country was about to be utterly destroyed. Her advisor desperately tried to restore order, urging her to calm down and pull herself together, while she helplessly protested that the Demon King was her father. The advisor's blunt words shattered her lingering hopes, reminding her sternly that her father was gone for good. Faced with the harsh reality, she silently accepted her position as the new Demon King, though she lamented that none of her subjects ever listened to a word she said. Sitting isolated atop the immense throne, the weight of her lonely ruler's status settled heavily upon the grand, empty hall. She harbored a deep insecurity, acutely aware that her lineage was divided, a mix between demon and human blood. She recalled how her father had left her the throne upon his passing, only for the demon populace to ridicule her, ignore her commands, and put a target on her head. Looking down in sorrow, she wondered whether her people would have obeyed her or stood unified if she had been born a full-blooded demon. Offering comfort, her faithful advisor reassured her that she was not alone in her struggles, advising that gathering even a few loyal followers today would ensure their descendants would loyally serve her tomorrow. She sat quietly, looking up with tear-filled eyes as she pondered what would happen if she dared to challenge Noah directly. Her horned advisor responded with stark bluntness, warning her that a single flick of his finger would send her head flying, guaranteeing her death. Deeply frightened, the young demon ruler confessed her terror of dying, hurting anyone, or being hurt, noting how many things she still wished to accomplish. Despite her fears, she steeled her resolve, declaring that if failing to act meant the death of countless demons and sorrow for her father, she would gladly offer her own life as a cheap price to pay. Bone-masked attendant stared in silence, struck by the weight of her determination. Overcome with sorrow, he wept internally at the cruel world that forced such a young girl to sacrifice herself, praying silently for someone to save her. Suddenly, the narrative shifts to the present moment inside Noah's quarters. Young Prince panicked in utter disbelief, shouting for staff as he demanded to know why the supposed demon king was prostrating herself before him in his own room. Begging earnest tears streaming down her face, she implored him to halt all preparations for attacking the demon kingdom. She continued her desperate plea, begging him to spare the innocent demons who had no part in the conflict. He and his feline companion exchanged bewildered looks, completely oblivious to any planned assault on the demon realm. Dismissing her earnest words as a bizarre role play, he accused her of feigning ignorance and asked her to take her intricate backstory elsewhere. Her expression darkened as she reflected on the historical animosity between humans and demons, realizing how natural it was for both sides to harbor deep grudges. Standing resolute, she offered her very life to him on the sole condition that he spare her people. With tears overflowing, she surrendered completely, begging him to do whatever he wished with her so long as innocent demons remained unharmed. She continued to sob uncontrollably, prompting Noah to confess to his companion that he couldn't comprehend a single word of her rambling speech, though he was beginning to feel a faint twinge of pity for her. Tears streaming down her face, the tearful demon lord explained that her only true desire was peace, while Noah looked on with a completely flat, unimpressed expression. Sensing his sudden movement, she let out a startled squeak as Noah raised his gloved hand toward her face. Instead of striking her, he gently rested his hand on her head, assuring her that he shared her desire for peace and had no interest in taking a child's life, leaving her utterly stunned. Sensing her relief, he promised to protect her peace regardless of her title, though he quickly glanced aside to check if he was handling the situation properly. Overwhelmed with gratitude that he had agreed not to invade and had even offered to protect the weak demon race, her eyes sparkled while Rory warned Noah that he had just blurted out something entirely unnecessary. Looking up at him with utter adoration, she marveled aloud at what a deeply kind person he truly was. Unable to contain her emotion, she lunged forward to embrace him, causing Noah to recoil in shock as he tried to clarify that he hadn't meant taking on the entire demon realm. Witnessing the exchange from the doorway, Lista praised her master for going beyond expectations to take the demons under his divine protection, leaving Noah horrified that his misunderstandings were escalating once again. Desperate to halt the growing misconception, Rory aggressively shook Noah, urging him to speak up before the demon lord's magic could bind him to her worship. Ignoring the chaos, Hold clung to Noah tightly, offering her heartfelt thanks and cementing her newfound devotion to him, as Rory dryly noted that another high-profile figure had joined the ever-growing cult surrounding the prince. A sudden loud commotion echoed outside the estate. Bursting into the chamber, a heavily wounded creature adorned with an animal skull mask cried out for hold, catching everyone off guard. As the battered visitor stumbled across the threshold, Hold recognized the creature as her trusted aide, while Noah demanded to know what had transpired. Collapsing collapsing onto the floor, the aide sobbed an apology, admitting failure to stop an incoming threat and leaving Hold in complete shock. She stood in shock as her wounded subordinate revealed the dire situation. News of her surrender to the humans had already spread, inciting forces that planned to forcibly recapture her. The aide warned that a massive horde of monsters was actively marching to invade the Carter territory itself. Hearing this, Hold gaped in disbelief at how quickly the peaceful moment had spiraled into a major crisis. While Noah calmly took a sip from a lavishly appointed room, an unexpected confrontation brewed as intruder figures suddenly manifested. Bright magic circles flared around Noah and his companions as he sharply questioned the uninvited guests for barging into his home. Floating midair outside the balcony, a high-ranking demon hovered menacingly alongside another figure. Introducing himself with a polite yet chilling bow, the masked entity named Ottersider formally presented himself. Recognizing the visitor, the young demon girl warned Noah that these were extremist demons from a completely different faction. She added with urgency that they belonged to the dangerous rank of special-grade demons. Noah nonchalantly turned back, questioning what business they could possibly have with him, and asking whether the girl beside them was truly the Demon Lord. Ottersider stated plainly that they had heard the Demon Lord was kidnapped by a human, and they had come to reclaim her. Interrupting their demand, Noah clarified that he never kidnapped anyone and had no intention of keeping her. With an astute gaze, he noted that the demon's words reeked of lies, instantly reading through the intent of a special-grade demon. Hovering outside, Ottersider brushed off the claim, remaining composed despite Noah stating how busy he was. Suddenly casting off all pretense, the masked demon demanded that the entire Carter territory be handed over to demon rule. Ottersider explained that their true goal was to expand into the human realm now that the hero's barrier was destroyed, while the former demon lord expressed shock at his betrayal. Glaring sharply, Ottersider cut her off with a cold command to stop talking. Dismissing the fallen demon lord's daughter as a pampered, weak trash figure, the invading demon expressed mock gratitude before casting her aside completely. Observing the bitter rift, Noah pieced together the chaotic politics of the demon realm, calmly inquiring if the invader intended to strike a deal. The armored demon found the proposal amusing, graciously offering to indulge the negotiation, though firmly noting that nothing would come without a steep price. He outlined his exorbitant terms, declaring that 10,000 high-grade demons would be stationed in every single village across the entire territory. Realizing the true motive was a complete hostile takeover, his companions panicked, frantically asking the young lord how they could possibly handle such a demand. Without a moment's hesitation, he cheerfully agreed to the terms with a bright smile. Sudden, cheerful acceptance left everyone in absolute shock, from his allies to the invading demon chief himself. Cat companion protested vehemently, pointing out that surrendering that much presence meant handing over the land entirely, to which he blithely agreed. Horrified by his nonchalance, his companion pressed further, demanding to know what would become of his standing and leadership if the domain were lost. He beamed with joy, explaining that an enemy takeover meant he could finally enjoy a cozy, stress-free retirement without any lordly duties. As his allies shrieked over the fate of the populace, he casually reassured them that he could simply use transfer magic to safely evacuate every single resident while letting the demons have the empty soil. Turning back to the stunned Ottersider, he casually confirmed if acquiring the physical land was their sole objective as a foothold. Pressing the advantage, he flashed a pleasant grin and demanded to know what compensation the invaders were offering in exchange for receiving his domain. As his bewildered allies looked on, he reminded the demon commander that a proper trade required mutual benefit for both parties. Shifting to a sharp, uncompromising tone, he made it clear that no unjust conqueror would profit from him without paying a steep price, leaving the demon flustered. He nonchalantly admitted to negotiating with the special-grade demon, shocking his small cat companion, who shrieked in total disbelief at such madness. Continuing with his calm logic, the young prince explained that he was sending the demon back so it could return with a superior willing to listen, opening the door for proper terms later. Turning back to the frantic creature, he pointed out how excessive it was to bring an army of 10,000 demons just to retrieve one little girl, leaving the cat suspecting his true underlying scheme. The smug smile, he questioned whether these figures with such feeble mana were even important at all, mocking the threat Ottersider and the demon lord posed. Small familiar screamed internally, realizing his master had completely misunderstood the grave reality of the situation. Meanwhile, Ottersiders seethed in anger as the young lord remained unbothered by threats of war and hostage-taking, trembling with rage at being mocked for the first time in his existence. Raising a glowing orb, the demon commander roared his command to order his 10,000-strong army to wipe the entire territory off the map, cackled in triumph, boasting that Noah's realm was doomed to total destruction. Vowing to make the prince regret ever ridiculing a special-grade demon, he waited for his dark forces to complete their strike. Turning to his returning scout, the commander eagerly demanded to know if the humans had been successfully wiped out, only to be met with hesitant silence. Bloodied soldier dropped to his knees, faltering as he reported the unthinkable truth. All 10,000 demon troops had been utterly destroyed. In sheer disbelief, the commander demanded an explanation, learning that upon reaching the village, his forces were instantly met with overwhelming resistance from knightly orders and battle mages. To make matters worse, even the common villagers possessed terrifying, unnatural strength and ruthlessly crushed the invading demon vanguard. Upon hearing the news, the young prince panicked in disbelief, realizing his entire plan to play the victim and negotiate from a position of weakness had been shattered by his absurdly overtrained populace. Grabbed by his collar, he faced the furious demon commander, who fell completely into despair, thinking the prince had masterminded a diabolical trap from the very beginning. Suddenly found himself targeted by Ottersider's violent fury, as the demon, enraged by the apparent trickery, lunged forward while bellowing his full name. Without missing a beat, the young prince swung back with explosive force, complaining loudly about the immense hassle of the situation. A single counterstrike shattered the surrounding structures and sent the demon commander crashing violently onto the rubble, completely incapacitated. As the dust settled, a sudden realization struck him, leaving him wide-eyed in horror. Clutching his head in sheer desperation, he panicked upon realizing that his reflex action had turned what was supposed to be a diplomatic moment into a brutal one-hit knockout. Desperately trying to justify himself, he argued that reacting to an attack is as natural as an apple falling to the ground, though the demon lord stood nearby in stunned disbelief. Standing over the collapsed commander, the demon queen recognized that the terrifying young man before her had effortlessly brought down their leader. The surrounding crowd immediately erupted into cheers, praising their lord's peerless strength for taking down the enemy boss so casually. Beside his small cat companion, he stood bewildered and sweating profusely, wondering what kind of absurd joke this situation had turned into. White Cat cheerfully pointed out that everyone now saw him as a brilliant mastermind who had foreseen the enemy's scheme and baited them into a trap, much to his utter dismay. Exasperated beyond belief, he whirled around to confront the demonic leader, shouting in protest at how absurdly things were being interpreted. Demon Lord contemplated the situation, realizing that with the extremist faction completely wiped out, the remaining peaceful demons would no longer be forced into war. Overwhelmed with gratitude, she dropped to her knees and pledged that all remaining demons would serve faithfully under his rule to rebuild the territory. While he panicked at the escalating misunderstanding, Prince Dagwa and his attendant watched the scene from a distance in complete, jaw-dropped shock. As Lady Sarah celebrated the wonderful, peaceful resolution to the conflict with the demons, he desperately begged her to stop talking before things spiraled any further out of control. He stood back as the surrounding crowd erupted into dynamic celebration, hailing the magnificent turn of events. Sarah relaxed comfortably against the defeated monster, wiping her brow in quiet admiration as everyone cheered for his incredible. Overwhelmed by the sudden influx of administrative duties, Noah cried out in desperation, begging his feline companion for assistance amidst the mountain of paperwork. Told protested about how busy they had become since forming their alliance. Noah casually pointed out that capable aides like Sarah and Lista were doing all the actual heavy lifting, leaving her with nothing more than basic stamping duties. Interrupting the exchange, the demon lord sheepishly approached Noah to bring up an important matter, earning a sharp scolding from the magical cat for adding further stress to his master. Nervously clutching her dress, she apologized for bringing up additional troubles during such a difficult time. She revealed her true concern, asking him if he could do something about the dark mist known as miasma, leaving Noah utterly baffled by the unfamiliar term. Miasma was a dense, dark fog enveloping the entire demon realm. While demons possessed natural resistance to its effects, it remained extremely toxic to human beings. The recent union between the Carter territory and the demon country, Holt expressed her desire for humans to travel freely across the borders, a dream made impossible as long as the lethal fog stood in their way. She further explained that the fog was expanding with every passing year, making entry completely impossible for ordinary people. Hearing this explanation, Lista finally understood the underlying reason why the demons had constantly sought to expand into human territory. Pondering his constant involvement in troublesome affairs, Noah lamented his luck, while his companion teased that he must have accumulated bad karma in a past life. Noah proudly boasted of his past life as a hero who defeated nearly 100,000 villains, prompting his companion to deadpan that such a violent history was precisely why so many grudges haunted him. Sighing at the realization, the young prince turned toward the demon lord and agreed to take on the request. With striking confidence, he announced his resolve to solve the miasma problem, bringing immense delight to Holt, even as Lista quietly suspected he was harboring ulterior motives to stage another display of incompetence. Traveling to the former demon capital of Karanstia, now part of the Carter territory, Noah stood before the towering demon castle, where the poisonous fog swirled at its thickest intensity. Gazing up at the ominous structure, he resolved to study the nature of the fog before deciding on his next course of action. He announced with a villainous smirk that he intended to spread the miasma further rather than clean it up, arguing that solving the problem cleanly wouldn't make him look like a competent, hard-working ruler. Reasoning out loud, he calculated that displacing the toxic fog toward the Carter territory would render the entire region uninhabitable for the human population. Gleefully declared that making the land unlivable would render a lord unnecessary, prompting his small feline companion to shriek in horror at his utter disregard for basic morals. As the cat called his plan evil and worried about the inhabitants, he casually dismissed the concerns, assuring that as long as they were properly evacuated, no one would actually die. Accused of lacking a human heart for taking away their homes, he simply suggested relocating the residents to mansions in a completely different territory. The self-satisfied smile, he concluded that being perceived as an incompetent ruler who had to evacuate an entire region suited his goals perfectly. Stepping inside the demon castle's domain, he prepared to investigate the epicenter of the toxic fog firsthand. Walking down the massive Gothic hall of the castle center, his cat companion began to feel sick from the dense, stagnant air. Noticing the cat's suffering, he reminded the demon creature that it wasn't even human to begin with, completely unfazed by the toxic environment himself. Observing the thick clouds pouring within the majestic hall, he deduced that the ultimate source of all the miasma was located somewhere inside the castle. Pondering the buildup underneath the structure, he considered whether the physical castle itself was acting as a plug holding back an even greater concentration of fog. The casual flick of his hand, he casually proposed blowing up the entire castle to clear the passage. His cat companion immediately panicked, warning him that destroying the castle would release a massive wave of trapped miasma that could destroy the whole region. Ignoring the cat's distress, he gently placed a protective helmet over the little creature's head to keep it safe from what was to come. Pointing directly at a specific section of the inner keep, he finalized his target, ready to unleash destructive magic upon the structure. He watched as a cataclysmic explosion tore through the demon castle, shattering its massive stone towers into countless flying fragments that rained down across the landscape. Shocked by the sheer destruction, his small feline companion screamed in utter disbelief as the fortress was obliterated into fine debris. The iconic spires of the ancient structure collapsed inward, crumbling into dust before even reaching the ground. Striking a casual pose, the young prince proudly announced that the monumental fortress had been reduced to absolute nothingness. Questioned in complete panic about how such destruction was possible, he nonchalantly claimed that he had merely snapped his fingers. He went on to elaborate that by transmitting powerful physical vibrations from his fingertips in the ground, he had caused the entire structure to resonate until it collapsed under its own weight without relying on magic. His companion exasperatedly pointed out that such a feat was far from normal, just as a sudden surge of dark energy erupted from the ground. As thick, black miasma began rushing outward in massive plumes, he celebrated joyfully, believing the poisonous fog would spread throughout the domain and make the territory completely uninhabitable. Throwing his head back in triumphant laughter, he fully believed he had successfully orchestrated his own failure. Yet, as the dark clouds began to settle over the ruined site, the true aftermath remained to be seen. A few days later, bright sunlight washed over the peaceful estate under clear, pristine skies. Suddenly, the demon lord burst into the room with pure joy, excitedly announcing that the miasma had vanished entirely, leaving the young prince paralyzed in utter shock. Stammering in confusion, he listened as she revealed that destroying the castle uncovered magical generators hidden inside, proving the castle itself was generating the miasma, not containing it. With glowing eyes, she praised him for instantly eliminating the true source of corruption that had plagued the realm for generations. Clinging to him affectionately, she celebrated his bloodless victory, leaving the young prince sweating in disbelief as his attempt to ruin his reputation transformed him into an even greater hero. He listened in disbelief as Hold lovingly explained that she fully understood his intent behind destroying the castle, a structure that had stood as an irreplaceable symbol of hope for all demonkind. She gleefully declared that his act was a bold proclamation of his intent to lead the demons himself, expressing deep gratitude for his profound consideration. Watching her fall completely into devotion, the small feline companion inwardly panicked, realizing the demon lord's absolute trust had spun the situation into an unimaginable disaster as the scene shifted back to the estate. Back in his office, Noah broke down in tears, sending papers flying into the air as he wailed in despair over how every single plan he made backfired into an overwhelming success. Observing his master's uncanny string of ironic luck, Adam solemnly suggested that he might actually be haunted by cursed spirits and urged him to seek an exorcism as soon as possible. Lying peacefully beneath the shade of a lush forest canopy, the young noble relaxes while his small feline companion wonders if this lazy routine will become an everyday habit. He muses that, were it not for the constant threat of being dragged into another troublesome ordeal, it would be an absolutely perfect day. This tranquil moment is abruptly broken when a sudden noise echoes from deeper within the woods, causing him to open his eyes in mild irritation. Sitting up while clutching his head at the loud clamor, he wonders aloud where the obnoxious noise could possibly be coming from as his companion watches closely. Strolling through the quiet forest trail, he decides to investigate the source, surprised that anyone else would be present in such a secluded place. A small clearing ahead, a young girl with braided hair and glasses vigorously swings a practice sword, shouting with determination with every strike. Observing her from behind a tree, he notes how unusual it is to spot a young child training this far away from the nearest village. Stepping out from cover, he calls out directly to ask what she is doing, startling the girl so severely that she spins around in shock. Stumbling back in panic after failing to detect his approach, she frantically apologizes and asks if she accidentally hurt him, though he casually brushes off her concern and inquires about her purpose. Striking a proud pose, the girl introduces herself as Urian and explains that she is on an aimless training journey to improve her skills, never expecting to encounter anyone out here. Suspicious of his master's sudden interest, the small cat accuses him of plotting another scheme, but the young prince ignores the warning and addresses Urian directly. Offering a dramatic gesture, he grandly proposes to personally guide her in her training since fate brought them together. While Urian reacts with pure delight at the generous offer, his cat companion squawks in utter disbelief at his master's unexpected willingness to help. Feline companion presses him, questioning why he continues to feign incompetence, which only serves to irritate the prince further. He considers how the lingering spirits of his past lives seem to twist his true intentions, consistently bringing about outcomes opposite to what he desires. Dismissing the cat's persistent warnings, he refuses to back down and prepares to proceed with Urian's instruction regardless of the consequences. He internally devised a petty scheme to utterly crush the young girl's confidence, hoping to discourage her from ever picking up a sword again so his unwanted royal reputation would drop. Reveling in his villainous plan, he laughed sinisterly at the thought of stripping away her spirit, while Adam watched in absolute disgust at his master's petty behavior. As Adam pondered where he had seen the young girl before, she watched Noah with growing curiosity. Urian asked him what weapon he intended to use for their match, as he casually prepared to grab something off the forest floor. Holding up a simple fallen tree branch, he declared with supreme confidence that a mere stick would be more than enough to handle someone of her level. Observing his sudden change in posture, Urian realized he was no ordinary adversary and resolved to strike him with everything she had. She lunged forward with blinding speed, but he easily evaded her attack, taunting that she was far too slow as Adam stared in shock at her velocity. Refusing to back down, the young girl launched into a rapid flurry of footwork and slashes, attempting to catch him off guard from every angle. He effortlessly dodged every single strike with his hands lowered, mockingly asking if that was the best she could do as her bewilderment grew. While Adam marveled at how remarkably skilled the girl was for her age, Urian looked up in awe, praising Noah's immense strength, which only amused him further. Urging her to come at him with the full extent of her training, he readied his wooden stick as she eagerly accepted the challenge. She unleashed her special technique, a rapid barrage of strikes called the autumn rain, but he instantly mirrored the exact same motion with his stick, sending her technique right back at her. Her clash intensified as he continuously parried her frantic swings with a relaxed smile, leaving her completely overwhelmed and frustrated. Laughing loudly, he mocked her efforts, questioning if this was truly the limit of her practice as the heavy clashing of stick and sword echoed through the woods. Breathing heavily, Urian admitted defeat in her heart, utterly dazzled by his overwhelming prowess and acknowledging that her own swordplay could never compete. She could only stand in dismay as Noah mockingly pointed out that all her long training had been entirely useless. Putting on a villainous grimace, Noah taunted her further, telling her to run back home, while Adam quietly noted how unervingly well the malicious expression suited his master. Realizing he was holding back, she resolved to unleash a secret technique originally meant only for slaying demons, taking a firm stance to prepare the attack. Accepting the challenge, she gripped her weapon with renewed determination, while Noah motioned for her to come at him without making any excuses. The fierce battle cry, she charged forward to unleash her powerful blow, prompting Noah to brace himself to take the incoming attack directly, knowing its potential danger. So she called out her secret holy technique. Noah swiftly struck before her move could resolve, instantly interrupting her attack and knocking her down. She fell. Noah casually adjusted his cloak with a satisfied smirk, leaving Adam wide-eyed at how mercilessly he had shut down her ultimate technique. Adam immediately called him out for such an underhanded tactic, pointing out that he had directly attacked her while she was in the middle of charging her ultimate move. Unfazed, he calmly countered that there is no fair play on a real battlefield, questioning what she would do if actual enemies refused to wait for her attacks. Looking at her tearful face, Noah suddenly felt a pang of guilt, worrying that his practical lesson had gone too far and made him look completely uncool in front of a child. Far from being crushed, her eyes sparkled with overwhelming admiration as she loudly exclaimed how amazing he was. Beaming with enthusiasm, she admitted her mistake in thinking combat was just about fair play, showering him with praise for his supreme skill and tactical wisdom. With a deep blush, she confessed that despite being completely outmatched, she had fallen completely in love with his magnificent swordsmanship. Dropping to her knees in a formal bow, she begged him to take her on as his disciple, leaving Noah completely stunned by her sudden turn of heart. The following day brought yet another unexpected disturbance, as Demon Lordhold came sprinting toward Noah in tears, wailing his name and begging for his immediate help. She cowered in absolute terror, pointing frantically toward the entrance and screaming in confusion about why her sworn enemy had appeared. Standing at the doorway was the hero herself, Uriel, identified by the demon lord as her absolute mortal adversary. Revelation left the young prince utterly stunned, unable to process the absurd twist of fate unfolding before him. Memories suddenly clicked into place as they recognized her as the true hero from the royal castle, though her missing glasses had initially disguised her identity. Adam scoffed at how weak she seemed compared to Noah, prompting Noah to point out that comparing anyone to his absurd strength was unfair. Overwhelmed with dread, the trembling demon lord clung tightly to Noah's side, weeping and begging him to protect her from the hero. Instead of attacking, the hero was thoroughly impressed, marveling at how Noah had managed to bend the demon lord to his will as a mere subordinate. As the demon lord shivered behind him in terror, Noah cautiously asked the hero if she still intended to slay her enemy. The bright, carefree smile, the hero completely dismissed the idea, declaring she would never harm anyone who served under Noah. She further explained that since humans and demons had established a peace treaty, her role as a hero was effectively over, leaving her to train purely for fun. Hearing this, the demon lord sobbed with overwhelming relief, realizing her greatest threat was no longer a danger. Peaceful resolution left Noah utterly bewildered, as he had expected to be resented for his harsh methods rather than adored. Both the hero and the demon lord showered him with praise, marveling at his ability to eclipse them both, while the spirits within him reveled in the chaotic harmony. Exasperated, the young prince slid his hands over his face, wondering why every conflict he encountered ended in such ridiculous absurdity. The king gaped in utter disbelief, unable to process the news that Noah had somehow managed to defeat the demon lord. Smiling cheerfully, Uriel corrected his misconception, clarifying that Noah had actually taken the demon lord as his subordinate to ensure her protection. He declared that with the demons now swearing peace alongside their leader, there was no longer any need for her to remain a hero, prompting her to relinquish her title. King flew into a rage, refusing to accept such a resolution, while the young hero looked on in confusion, wondering why peace was not the desired outcome. Panicking internally, the ruler realized that without an active threat from demons, the kingdom would lose its political support and financial aid from neighboring nations. Furthermore, if word spread that the banished incompetent prince was the one who tamed the demon lord, the king's own legitimacy and ruling competence would be fiercely questioned. Bellowed in anger, shouting that demon lords were inherently evil entities that had to be eliminated before they inevitably betrayed humanity. Demanding immediate action, the monarch ordered his guards to bring him the girl's head using the sacred sword, insisting that any obedience from the demon lord was merely a facade. Surrounded by chanting crowds demanding the demon lord's death, Uriel stood firm amidst the deafening pressure. She boldly refused to betray her friend, reaffirming her vow never to decapitate someone who was now an ally. Dropping her sacred sword to the floor with a clatter, she turned away, demonstrating her absolute refusal to carry out the king's brutal command. Stepped forward to seize the moment. Prince Dabwa volunteered to take up the mantle of hero if the girl refused to perform her duty. Promising his father that he would complete the task, Dabwa pledged not to stop until the demon lord was thoroughly slain. She began walking away. Uriel warned him that Noah would not stand idly by and permit such actions against his companion. Dabwa merely smirked, taunting her by asking if she was truly giving up her title out of fear or simply making excuses. As the crowd murmured in disbelief at the young hero's sudden resignation, his opportunistic gaze lingered on her shadowy, resolute figure. He brandished his blade with a manic grin, loudly proclaiming to the onlookers that he would step forward to take her place as the realm's true savior. Moved by his boasting, she fixed him with a cold, terrifying glare, uttering a single, icy command for him to step out of her way. Sprinting away from his startled reaction, she announced her intention to seek out Noah and train under his guidance before vanishing into the distance. Eager to capitalize on her departure, he rushed directly to the king, begging to be officially appointed as the new hero, only for his father to interrupt with an urgent decree. Massaging his aching temples in deep stress, the monarch demanded that his son bring Noah back to the palace at once, leaving the young prince completely bewildered. Protested vehemently, questioning his father's motives while boasting of his unmatched sword saint skills and his capability to destroy any threat. Sovereign erupted in fury, threatening to strip him of his royal birthright and banish him from the family if he dared disobey the command, causing the shocked prince to drop his sword in terror. Standing frozen amidst the whispers of the palace court, the sting of humiliation began to fester inside him. His eyes darkened with venomous hatred, gritting his teeth as he swore vengeance against his brother for bringing such disgrace upon him. Far from the royal drama, The magical demon cat found herself overwhelmed with estate paperwork, complaining while attempting to maintain her dignity. Relaxing comfortably, Noah gently cradled his feline companion, bribing her with dried treats and chuckling at how easily she could be appeased. He suggested that he simply run away if he despised being a lord so much. A sudden revelation struck the young noble like a bolt of lightning, hailing it as the single greatest idea he had ever heard. Instantly convinced, he declared his intent to abandon the tedious duties left by his father and bid farewell to the troublesome territory, leaving his companion utterly stunned by his sudden lack of restraint. While his companion fretted over the madness of it all, he enthusiastically devised what he proudly dubbed his grand scheme, to cast away everything he despised and make a clean break. Realizing she would be held accountable for inspiring his desertion, the demon girl insisted on fleeing alongside him, refusing to be left behind to face the fallout alone. Stepping out into the brutal storm, the howling winds instantly battered them, prompting a hasty magical retreat to a nearby inn to escape the torrential downpour. Safe inside their room, the former lord stretched out in pure bliss, relishing the glorious absence of mountains of paperwork. Questioned about the abandoned realm's future, he casually dismissed her concerns, assuring her that the imperial crown would simply dispatch a replacement in due time. Pondering their next destination, he proposed taking refuge with his sister, who had married into royalty abroad, and immediately set about drafting a formal correspondence. Considering his connection to the emperor's family, the companion marveled at how far his reaching influence truly extended. Sipping tea peacefully, she voiced doubt that his subjects would let him slip away so easily, even as he claimed to have left behind a brief note instructing them not to follow. She pointed out that standard couriers would take days to deliver his message across borders, but he merely smiled, confident in his unorthodox methods. The quick fold of the parchment, he transformed his handwritten missive into an intricate paper crane. Channeling his magical reserves, he casually bestowed sentient life upon the paper construct, flabbergasting the demon girl with a feat considered impossible even by demonic standards. Noticing the fierce storm raging outside, he worried the ink might run before the messenger arrived, though waiting for clear skies was out of the question. With an absurdly casual expression, he announced his intention to simply wipe the entire deluge out of existence, leaving his companion speechlessly bewildered once again. Casually explained his sound reasoning to his astonished companion, pointing out that a storm was nothing more than strong winds spinning in big circles. Raising a single finger, he simply twirled it in the reverse direction to counteract the swirling winds. High above, the massive storm clouds immediately responded to his spell, reversing their swirl across the darkened sky. Then calculated that by gathering all the atmospheric humidity into one concentrated point and applying fire magic, the entire tempest could be dispelled. Unleashing a sudden burst of searing heat, he incinerated the gathered moisture in a blinding flash. Thick clouds vanished entirely, leaving behind a clear blue sky that left the demon girl utterly speechless at such impossible magic. The weather cleared, he handed his enchanted paper bird off to deliver the message to his sister before stretching his arms, declaring it was time for sleep, while his companion warned him about the nearby villagers. Relaxing inside, he felt confident that no one from the capital could possibly track his current location. Outside, tranquility returned to the quiet estate under the gentle daylight. The young demon curled up and drifted off into a peaceful slumber. Next morning arrived, and he sat up in bed with a cheerful yawn to greet the day. His absolute shock, Lista was standing right beside his bed, prompting him to instantly accuse the cat creature of leaking their secret location. Demanding answers, he pressed her to explain how she could possibly have tracked him down to this secluded place. Looking somewhat hesitant, the maid revealed that she had recently received a special gift. She explained that after defeating numerous high-level monsters, she had unlocked a rare gift skill, leaving him bewildered as to what kind of power she now possessed. She blushingly announced her new skill, "My love for Noah-sama," which grants her the ability to sense his exact location at all times, no matter where he goes. The young prince stood dumbfounded by her intense, obsessive devotion. Astounded that such an absurd power even existed, he called her out, accusing her of advancing far beyond a mere stalker, while she gleefully imagined tracking him down anywhere. Brought up the note he had left behind, explicitly instructing her not to follow him into the dangerous tempest. Holding up the letter, she eagerly confirmed having read it, calling his written words about going to deal with the storm because the villagers were important to him, and warning her to stay back for her own safety. She looked at him with starry eyes. She enthusiastically interpreted his note as a hidden message of affection, forcing him to exasperatedly yell that she was reading far too deeply into a simple warning. The small demon cat pointed out that Noah was indeed the one who stopped the storm. The devoted maid showered him with praise, hailing him once more as their savior. The storm fully resolved, she explained that she used her tracking skill to bring him back to the mansion, pointing toward a waiting carriage ready to take them home. Suddenly, a crowd of joyful villagers swarmed the area, cheering ecstatically and expressing their immense gratitude to him for saving their homes and farmlands. Inside the bustling carriage, he slumped in defeat over his lack of privacy, while the demonic archive girl teased that escape was no longer an option. Across the waters, a troubled beauty whispers the name of the prince she has waited so long to finally meet. Arriving at the coastal shores, the cat-eared companion leaps with delight at the sight of the open sea, while Noah remains calm and focused despite her playful excitement. She defends her enthusiasm, pointing out that it is her very first time seeing an actual beach. Noah redirects the conversation, reminding everyone of the true purpose behind their journey to the port town. He explains that his sister received a letter prompting this visit to check up on her. Walking down the coastal path together, they discuss their plans to greet her upon her arrival. Noah notes that she is not traveling alone, as her husband will be accompanying her. Upon realizing who her husband is, a figure linked to the Empire, the companions recognize a pivotal opportunity presenting itself. With a bold smirk, Noah declares his intention to kidnap the imperial prince, dismissing the foolishness of the idea while accepting the risk of triggering an outright war. Surrounding villagers erupt into panic, dreading the impending invasion and destruction of their homeland if such a plot succeeds. While the cat-eared companion berates Noah for his twisted logic and the threat it poses to the locals, the rest of the group imagines the villagers easily meeting a grim fate. Spotting an approaching ship on the horizon, Noah casually reassures them that he will refrain from doing anything overly drastic. With resolute determination, he leaps in motion toward the incoming vessel. Standing upon the shore, Noah looks up as a grand sailing ship anchors near the coast. Observing the smaller landing boats being deployed, he notes the surprisingly heavy escort accompanying the arrival. He observed the approaching fleet from afar, noting a massive vessel trailing smaller, heavily seated craft, doubting they were merely an honor guard. Smiling with quiet confidence, he prepared to put his grand scheme into motion while his feline companion praised his flair for dramatic acting. Aboard one of the landing craft, a rough-looking commander urged his crew to make landfall rapidly, unaware of the trap awaiting them. Before they could drop anchor, he leaped directly onto their deck, landing effortlessly and startling the armed crew. With an arrogant grin, he boldly proclaimed his identity as the Lord of the Carter territory and declared his intention to take their most prized target. Watching from his shoulder, the cat familiar couldn't help but yell at how villainous the announcement sounded. Standing alone amidst a sea of hostiles, he maintained an unfazed posture as the crew drew their weapons. Captain questioned his absurd claim, but he merely repeated his intent with a casual nod. Seeing that he was unaccompanied, the captain ordered his men to swarm him, but the young prince didn't even flinch as they launched. In an instant, the attackers collapsed to the deck, clutching their throats and gasping frantically for air as an invisible force crushed them. Captain stumbled back in absolute horror, demanding to know what black magic had been unleashed upon his men. He offhandedly mentioned that he had simply removed the surrounding oxygen with wind magic, prompting his cat companion to panic that the men might suffocate. Reassuring his familiar, he clarified that he was leaving just enough air to keep them alive, leaving the creature awestruck by his flawless, chantless spellcasting. Casually brushed off the feat as basic spell work, though his companion sighed, knowing his master's definition of normal was entirely warped. Trembling with terror, the captain could only back away and call him a monster as the young lord stepped forward to claim his prize. He watched silently as the defeated pirate captain fled into the distance, bellowing desperate threats of revenge after his crew was completely overwhelmed. Adam expressed concern about allowing the messenger to escape, fearing he would report everything to the Empire. But Noah calmly explained that permitting him to report back was precisely his intention. Seating down into the vessel's lower deck, the young prince kicked open the heavily locked cabin door with a loud, cheerful apology for his sudden intrusion. To his utter amazement, he discovered his older sister Mazian bound securely in rope alongside her captured attendants. Entering the room, he blurted out his confusion as to why his royal sister was tied up in such a precarious position. Mazian gazed up at him flushed and teasingly asked if he had come specifically to save her, leaving Noah entirely dumbfounded. Examining the scene more closely, Noah observed the neatly tied knots securing the women, while the male escorts stood nearby, relatively unharmed. He found it thoroughly suspicious that only his sister and her female companions had been carefully bound while the male guards were left untouched. Mazian expressed her relief and gratitude, clarifying that they were ambushed by those men on their way to the Carter territory. Realizing the hostile force were actual pirates rather than Imperial escorts, Noah reacted with intense disbelief. Surviving escorts lauded Prince Noah, praising his swift intervention before the Imperial army could even respond. Suddenly, Adam caught sight of an unexpected figure emerging from behind the cabin curtains. Small, refined child wearing a tiny royal crown stepped into the light with wide, solemn eyes. Without hesitation, the young noble threw his arms around Noah in a tight embrace, offering heartfelt gratitude while Adam watched in shock. The room erupted in astonishment as it was revealed that this adorable young boy was none other than His Highness Prince Galcia. He clung tightly to his savior, tearfully recounting how terrified they had been when captured by pirates, only to be miraculously saved. Princess Mazian gazed at Noah with profound relief and admiration, a look that did not go unnoticed by the small white cat, who quietly realized her expression mirrored the adoration Lista held for him. The captives safely rescued and crisis averted, the ship set sail across tranquil, sunlit waters, signaling that a full-scale war with the Empire had been successfully avoided. Meanwhile, out on the open sea, a lone surviving pirate desperately pulled on his oars, sweating profusely as he tried to row his small wooden boat to safety. Before he could escape, a colossal shark suddenly erupted from the ocean depths right behind his tiny vessel, its massive jaws gaping open as horror struck. With earnest, sparkling eyes, young Prince Galcia enthusiastically begs Noah to teach him how to use magic, having completely warmed up to him ever since his life was saved. Trying to dodge the sudden responsibility, he politely attempts to brush the young boy off by claiming to be far too busy at the moment. Unfazed, the young prince pouts and calls him a liar, looking down guiltily while persisting with his humble request for magic lessons. As he hesitates, Princess Mazian steps forward and gently adds her own request, explaining that learning magic could be a wonderful experience for her younger brother, who rarely plays outside. Realizing that he cannot possibly refuse a direct favor asked by the princess herself, he relents while Adam looks on, thoroughly amused by how rare this situation is. She offers a soft, radiant smile, expressing her sincere gratitude and praising him for being as kind and considerate as ever. He responds with a confident smile, mentally preparing himself for the lesson ahead. Meanwhile, quiet observations are made regarding the foreign royal's complex background, noting the significant age gap between Mazian and Galcia and reflecting on the heavy political burdens placed upon young shoulders. In his mind, he humorously dramatizes his latest political maneuver, celebrating what he considers another masterful display of played incompetence. Turning back to the siblings, he instructs Princess Mazian to report their progress to the Empire, while assuring the enthusiastic prince that they will keep the training manageable. Beginning the practical tutorial outdoors, he demonstrates the basic fundamentals of magic, explaining how mana is stored just below the navel and must be channeled evenly throughout the body. Without a second of hesitation, young Galcia unleashes an astounding, blinding aura of magical power, leaving his teacher utterly flabbergasted by the child's absurd latent capacity. Watching from the sidelines, Adam chuckles at how unexpectedly gifted the boy is, realizing that entertaining kids might turn out to be more intense than anticipated. Hoping to test the boy's fine control, he asks Galcia to manipulate the released mana, only for the prince to seamlessly execute the high-level technique on his very first attempt. Completely bewildered by how effortlessly the prince mastered it, he mutters in disbelief, only for Adam to dryly remind him that normal humans cannot naturally manipulate complex magic as easily as a reincarnated sage. He had initially assumed that the difficult magical technique would be far beyond the young prince's capabilities, inwardly celebrating what he thought would be a quick and easy lesson. Suddenly, the child erupted with an overwhelming surge of magical energy, levitating into the air with glee, while both the young lord and his familiar gaped in utter shock. Reeling from the sheer velocity of the release, he stared in disbelief as a massive aura of magic swirled violently around the floating prince. Tears welled in the child's eyes as panic set in, his frightened cries confirming that he had completely lost control of the surging torrent. Recognizing that the boy's frail body couldn't withstand the strain and that the imminent explosion would blow everyone away, he resolved to stop the magic by brute force. Lunging forward with lightning speed, he struck the child to forcibly interrupt his magic, prompting a horrified cry from Princess Mazian as the boy went limp. Catching the unconscious prince gently in midair, he leapt back down and landed smoothly on the ground amidst a cloud of swirling dust. Princess immediately dropped to her knees to gather the unconscious child into her arms, her voice trembling as she checked his condition. Cradling him close, she wept softly, mournfully murmuring that the tragic moment she had feared for so long had finally come. Bewildered by her dramatic grief, he called out to her, unable to fathom why she was reacting with such deep despair. She tearfully wondered aloud if this final lesson had brought the boy happiness, causing him to recoil in confusion and demand to know what she meant by his last lesson. She recounted how physicians had warned from the day of the prince's birth that his frail, sickly body would not survive for long. She explained that the boy had desperately wished to meet him. His cat familiar interjected indignantly, questioning why she would risk bringing such a fragile child out into the field. She sobbed that the physical blow used to quell the magic might have triggered his delicate condition. The panic-stricken familiar turned on his master, asking why he hadn't chosen a gentler method. Sweat dropping in flustered panic, he defensively argued that knocking the prince out had clearly been the safest and most efficient way to prevent a catastrophic explosion. Watched impassively as the surrounding nobles erupted in outrage, berating his seemingly ruthless action while Princess Mazian wept over her brother's motionless body. Overcome with sorrow, the princess confessed that what had begun as a mere political arrangement had transformed into a deep desire to stand beside the young prince until his final breath. She lamented his untimely end. Even the cat spirit was moved to tears by her devotion, while the seventh prince silently noted a subtle shift in the fallen boy's condition. Suddenly, Prince Galcia sat upright with an energetic gasp, declaring that he felt entirely fine and throwing the grieving onlookers into utter shock. Marveling at his newfound vitality, the young prince stood up effortlessly, prompting his astonished sister to demand an explanation from his savior. Clarifying his swift strike, he explained that he had merely realigned the boy's magic circuits after his overwhelming mana had gone out of control. Detailed how magic circuits function like pathways for mana, pointing out that a swift, precise blow was all it took to unblock the buildup of power. Went on to reveal that the boy possessed a vast reservoir of magic similar to his own, which his frail physical body simply could not handle. Including his explanation, he assured them that as the young prince grew, his adjusted magic channels would now comfortably expand alongside his body. Relieved beyond measure, Princess Mazian offered him a beaming smile, praising his true kindness despite his harsh demeanor. Before he could react, she pulled him into a suffocating, affectionate embrace, much to his flustered embarrassment. A few days later, an urgent message arrived at the estate from the neighboring empire, signaling an unexpected development. Head butler burst into the room, shouting that an official letter of gratitude had arrived, containing a pledge of lasting alliance from the foreign royal family for curing their prince. Stunned by the grandiose tone of the missive, the young prince questioned what absurd details his sister had reported to cause such a reaction. Princess Maizian had simply stated that he had cured the terminal illness instantly. He grumbled in resignation, knowing that her literal description was, in fact, entirely accurate. Listened in stunned silence as Princess Maizian cheerfully mentioned that news of the Empire's official letter of thanks was already being circulated throughout the entire kingdom. Adam chimed in, pointing out how receiving direct gratitude from both the Empire and the young prince himself was cementing his image as an exceptionally competent figure. The young prince clutched his head in utter exasperation, screaming internally over how his unwanted reputation continued to balloon out of control. Meanwhile, inside a horse-drawn carriage traveling down a remote road, a figure wearing black gloves quietly read through a written dispatch detailing these extraordinary accomplishments. A surge of sudden fury gripped the reader, caused the gloved hands to violently crumple the paper in a sharp burst of anger. Bearer of the holy sword, Dagwa, glared ahead with a fierce, malicious expression as he squeezed the ruined letter, vowing that his rival's moment of triumph would not last. Traveling by carriage, Sixth Prince Dagwa impatiently demanded to know if they had reached the Carter territory yet. His escort explained that while the standard route would take several days, cutting directly through the abyssal forest could prove much faster. Without hesitation, he sharply ordered his driver to take the shortcut, taking his guards completely off guard. The guard protested immediately, warning him that the abyssal forest was insanely dangerous, but the prince refused to listen, prioritizing speed over safety. In response to their hesitation, the prince unsheathed his blade with a cold, metallic sound, brandished his sword directly at his attendant, threatening to fire him and force him off the carriage for daring to challenge his authority as a bearer of the sword saint's skill. Frightened guards backed away in shock, realizing that their warnings were useless against his reckless hostility. Fearing arrest if he failed to fulfill his father's command quickly, he dismissed the rest of his staff in a panicked rage, demanding they move faster. As the carriage plunged deep into the dense canopy of the abyssal forest, a sudden noise startled the arrogant prince. Massive, monstrous creatures suddenly emerged from the shadows, causing the terrified guards to panic as they realized the danger. Surrounded on all sides by hideous beasts, the prince barked orders at his men to move forward and clear a path, blaming them for dragging him down. Cruelly ordered his commoner guards to act as human shields and buy him time to escape, callously declaring that their lives held no other value. The armored guards stood in stunned silence, staring at their master with sheer disgust and disbelief at his complete lack of empathy. Snapping under the weight of his cruel disrespect, the guards firmly refused his command, catching the prince completely off guard. They declared they would no longer follow him, telling him to use his praised sword saint skills to fight for himself while they saved their own lives. Left entirely alone, he screamed in desperate anger, asserting his royal status as the sixth prince as his men abandoned him to the approaching monsters. He recoiled in utter disbelief as his own royal guard turned his back on him, declaring firmly that the nation's true treasure was the seventh prince, Noah, rather than a master who held no regard for his men. Soldiers remembered how Lord Noah had previously driven back a ferocious horde of monsters to protect the common people, refusing to sacrifice a single life for his own safety. Unwilling to throw away their lives for an unworthy royal, the guards deserted him on the spot, leaving him alone in the dangerous forest while calling him incompetent. Furious and humiliated, he screamed after his departing men, unable to accept that mere commoners dared to judge him so harshly. Left completely defenseless in the woods, the arrogant noble found himself surrounded on all sides by ravenous beasts, terror gripping his heart. Driven by sheer survival instinct, he lashed out frantically with his holy sword, screaming desperately that he refused to die in such a place. Colossal beast towered over him, its jaws wide open as he struck out with every ounce of his remaining strength. The slaughter finally ended. He collapsed onto the blood-soaked earth among the mountain of slain monsters, gasping for air. As he caught his breath, a hooded girl descended from the shadows, teasingly asking why he seemed so troubled while complimenting his fierce combat skill in clearing the horde alone. The mysterious girl presented a glowing, ornate artifact, explaining that it was an ancient magical tool crafted by the dark sage capable of turning its user into a superhuman being. She enticed him further, revealing that activating the device would absorb all surrounding dark energy, bestowing ultimate power upon its master. The sinister smile, she offered the tempting power directly to him. Overcome by a desperate desire to crush his enemies and reclaim his pride, he demanded that she hand the artifact over immediately. A hooded figure placed the swirling dark sphere into his hands, readily granting his demand. The moment his fingers touched the magical relic, an explosive surge of dark energy erupted, consuming him in a tempest of malevolent power. He marveled at the staggering dark power surging through his transformed body as the blade fused with his flesh, cackling madly at the sheer, unfiltered strength of the great sage's relic. Miles away, the young seventh prince suddenly froze, his sharp eyes widening as an inexplicable, sinister tremor rippled through the mana in the air. He grimaced in alarm as his companion turned toward him, immediately picking up on his distress and realizing that an overwhelming, malevolent presence had just awakened. Noticeably shaken, the youth listened as she inquired about his pale complexion, unable to conceal the growing dread settling over his mind. As the realization dawned upon them, the conversation quickly turned toward the immediate danger threatening Ein village. At that very moment, a horrific monster unleashed total destruction upon the peaceful settlement, reducing buildings to splintered ruins amidst violent explosions. Shattering stone pillars with brute force, the beast roared as it crushed everything in its path, leveling the surrounding countryside. He threw his head back in wild euphoria, laughing hysterically as dark energy overflowed from every pore of his monstrous form. Gripping his oversized blade tightly, he declared to the open air that this unyielding power was precisely what he had been seeking all along. Standing amid the burning ruins, he convinced himself that with this newfound supreme strength, no one could ever ignore him again, and the world would bow to his majesty. His gleaming eye locked onto the inhabitants of the domain in the distance, his voice dripping with murderous intent as he resolved to slaughter them. Carving a deep trench into the earth with his massive weapon, he charged forward like a runaway train, bent on total annihilation. However, his murderous momentum was brought to a sudden halt as Noah stepped directly into his path, standing firm to shield the villagers. He stood composed and unyielding against the towering beast, summoning his formidable power as a roar echoing with supreme authority shook the battlefield. Across the desolate battlefield, cries of relief echoed among the survivors as the young prince arrived to face the looming menace. Spotting his target, the towering, monstrous giant bellowed with maniacal delight, eager to finally clash with him. As he took a step forward, his companions quickly intervened, calling out that they would handle the brute themselves. Leaping into action, they unleashed a devastating combined magical strike, enveloping the giant in a tremendous fireball and blinding cloud of smoke. Emerging virtually unscathed, the giant smirked with contempt, bellowing in rage at the allies for getting in his way. With terrifying speed, the brute lunged forward to strike them down, forcing the young prince to step in and shield them at the last split second. Furious at their carelessness, he turned back to sternly reprimand them for putting themselves in such unnecessary danger. Turning back toward the monster, his eyes burned with fierce resolve as he declared that he would show no forgiveness. Unfazed by the giant's reckless charge, he evaded the massive strike effortlessly before delivering a swift, decisive counterattack. Unleashing the vast power of the Sage of Darkness, he obliterated the surrounding terrain, leaving both his enemies and onlookers awestruck by his overwhelming force. Standing calm and composed amid the destruction, he stared down the giant, whose face twisted in shock and sheer terror. With an icy composure, he coldly revealed that the opponent standing before him was nothing more than a temporary clone. As the clone's body disintegrated under the impact, it cried out in disbelief, unable to fathom how it was defeated even after consuming the elixir of darkness. Silencing the dying construct with absolute disdain, he commanded it to speak no further, leaving his companions stunned by a depth of anger they had never seen in him before. The threat eliminated, a heavy silence settled over the ruined landscape as his allies looked on in quiet concern at his unyielding, dark demeanor. He stood resolute before the wall, facing the desperate enemy who repeatedly demanded to secure the source of power. Out of nowhere, a massive dark arm surged forward, commanding everything to clear out of the way. The crushing impact, the adversary was pinned down into the ground amidst flying debris. Reaching out helplessly while writhing in agony, the attacker screamed as dark shadows consumed him, begging desperately for salvation. The fallen adversary cried out for help, just as Noah invoked his creation magic to manifest a blade. Leaping fluidly through the air, Noah swooped down toward his target with single-minded precision, delivering a decisive strike. He carved straight through the dark entity, engulfing the victim. As Noah landed gracefully atop the rock, the gathered villagers erupted into cheers, celebrating the defeat of the monster and the safety of their home. Looking closer at the remnants, the onlookers gasped upon realizing that the figure beneath the dark substance was still alive. Companion called out in shock, recognizing the pale, bare-chested young man emerging from the sludge as Noah's older brother, Prince Dagwa. A wave of confusion swept through the villagers as they struggled to comprehend how the monster that attacked them was Prince Dagwa himself. Disoriented and trembling, Dagwa looked at his hands, wondering where he was and what became of the Dark Sage's power. Reflecting on the dark magic overflowing from the prince, the small companion asked Noah if he had severed only the wild, corruptive energy from his brother. Villagers began murmuring among themselves, praising Noah for saving them, while questioning Dagwa's treasonous attack. Staring down in disbelief and remorse, Dagwa stammered softly, realizing the grave consequences of his actions. He remained silent as the crowd of onlookers raised their voices in disbelief, demanding to know why the young prince had spared the one who brought so much destruction. Turning toward Sarah, the young prince expressed his relief that she was safe, though his calm demeanor caught those around them completely off guard. He could hardly believe her ears, questioning if he truly cared so deeply for his brother's well-being after everything that had transpired. Meanwhile, the defeated sixth prince slowly regained his senses, stunned to discover that the very brother he sought to kill had ultimately saved his life. Overwhelmed with remorse, he collapsed to his knees, weeping profusely and begging for forgiveness for his foolish jealousy. With tears streaming down his face, the fallen prince declared that his younger brother was the true heir worthy of inheriting the throne. Observing the dramatic scene from a distance, the small spirit found the emotional display absurdly exaggerated, questioning the true motives behind the noble act. Inspecting the shattered remains of the dark artifact on the ground, the young prince explained that he was simply trying to destroy an embarrassing relic of the past. Magical Cat gasped in sudden realization upon examining the fragments, recognizing the item as an embarrassing creation from the prince's previous life. Flustered and blushing intensely, the young prince hushed his companion, mortified at the thought of his cringeworthy past being exposed to the world. His companion poked fun at the edgy, dramatic naming conventions of his old creations, driving the young prince into further embarrassment. Desperate to hide his youthfully foolish mistakes, he insisted that such cringeworthy memories should remain buried in total darkness forever. Shuddered as images filled his mind, fearing his deepest, most embarrassing secrets might be dug up and paraded around like an old childhood notebook. White Cat stared at him with a deadpan expression, piecing together the true, petty reason behind his heroic intervention. Sweating nervously, the prince admitted with a forced smile that saving his brother was purely a byproduct of destroying the evidence of his past. Watched as the small white cat demon barked in exasperation at how utterly ridiculous the whole ordeal had been. Creature continued to scold him, pointing out how mortifying it was that so many people had witnessed his antics, while he could only offer a weak defense about his unexpected actions. Meanwhile, the surrounding nobles showered him with praise, marveling at how he had saved his brother from the darkness and outshone Prince Dagwa, while the bewildered prince stammered that it was all a massive misunderstanding. To make matters worse, Dagwa himself gave a confident thumbs up, proudly declaring his younger brother to be the absolute best. As the crowd dispersed, the cat companion pondered privately whether the fool who had actually taken the Dark Sage's medicine was truly the foolish prince after all. Far away from the royal gathering, shadows stretched over a dark, ominous mountain peak shrouded in mystery. Inside the hidden lair, a masked figure addressed the assembled conspirators, announcing that Zvai's scheme had officially failed. Masked members argued back and forth, furious over the loss of the precious medicine and questioning how they would answer for it. Though one sinister figure noted that the new lord was simply far too formidable. Recognizing the danger, the leader decided that they must keep a close watch on the young prince to avoid finding themselves at a fatal disadvantage. Smirk crossed the speaker's face as he reminded the cabal that they still possessed the leftover mystery of darkness left behind by the dark sage. Thick, heavy chains rattled in the dim light, binding a powerful entity deep within the subterranean depths. Suspended in a web of iron, a glowing orb pulsated with malice, waiting for the dark forces to finally revive. Clasping her hands together in delight, Lady Ceredius enthusiastically proposes that they should host a girls' party. Hearing the unfamiliar term, Lista turns to her companions and asks what exactly a girls' party entails. Ceredius gleefully explains that a girls' party is a gathering where young women come together to eat sweets and gush about love. Overjoyed by the idea, the companions quickly agree and extend a warm invitation for everyone to join. However, Rory pauses nervously, realizing that hosting a gathering with these two eccentric girls might lead to trouble. Ceredius points out that so much has happened recently, from demon invasions to befriending a demon lord, and though it was all Noah's fault, it offers a rare moment to relax together. They turn and ask for her opinion. Rory tries to bow out gracefully, claiming she cannot make it. She immediately falters under the intense, unspoken pressure radiating from the enthusiastic pair. Ceredius instructs everyone to gather in her room at 7 o'clock, suggesting she bring a treasured, rare photograph of Lord Noah. Rory accuses her of outright stalking, but Ceredius casually reveals that her subordinate managed to capture a super rare photo of Noah changing clothes while half asleep. Flustered and scandalized by the revelation, Rory fiercely vows to personally attend the party just to ensure that such an improper picture is instantly destroyed. As the others celebrate her decision to join, Rory defensively insists that she is only coming for the sake of the photo's destruction. Night falls over the estate as the scheduled hour arrives. Inside the private room, the official girls' party with Lord Noah's admirers officially commences. Rory's utter horror, Ceredius proudly unveils her prized possession, a full-size body pillow featuring Lord Noah's likeness. She stared in complete disbelief at the custom-made merchandise, amazed that such rare items of the prince were even available to buy. Overcome with excitement, she demanded to buy multiple copies of every item for display, practical use, and preservation, while Ceredius happily accepted the sales. Shifting the focus of the party, Ceredius then brought out homemade snacks for everyone to sample. As the girls devoured the delicious treats, Ceredius proudly mentioned that she baked them specifically for the gathering, noting that Noah himself had once complimented them. Memory played out where Noah had wandered into the kitchen drawn by the aroma, only to reach for a tray of overcooked, failed cookies that Ceredius had tried to hide. In that memory, he had taken a bite with a warm, reassuring smile, telling her that they tasted good just as they were. Back in the present, Lista gasped in utter shock as the emotional weight of the story hit her. She suddenly collapsed right onto the floor, completely overwhelmed. Adam quickly used resurrection magic to revive her, scolding her for passing out from sheer fandom intensity. Ceredius continued her story, adding with a blush that her sweat had mixed into the dough, causing Lista to collapse out of shock yet again, while Adam complained about her ruined appetite. Curious about her background, Lista asked Ceredius how she had become such a perfect maid. Ceredius explained that having lost her parents at a young age, learning to serve others came naturally because she simply wanted to see people smile. Noah gently pat her head, acknowledging the hardship she had endured in her past. Seeing Noah's affection towards Ceredius caused Lista to collapse in envy for a third time, leading Adam to forcefully revive her once more. As the gathering quieted down, the girls began asking Ceredius about the long history of her engagement to Noah. She then turned her attention toward Rory, declaring that it was her turn to answer questions. Driven by intense curiosity, she pressed the feline demon about her origins, asking how long she had served Noah and inquiring whether her true nature was that of a cat, a demon, or even a dragon. Reflecting on her past encounters, she recalled that whenever she had met Noah in her younger years, a small white cat was always by his side, prompting her to ask if that cat had been Rory all along. As the pieces fell into place, Both she and Lista stared in wide-eyed realization at the sheer length of time Rory had been with him. Excitedly, they declared that Rory was officially member number 0 of Noah's fan club, the very first among them all, leaving the bewildered demon completely taken aback. Leaning in closer with glowing eyes, the pair passionately demanded that she reveal everything about Noah's childhood, insisting that keeping such precious memories to herself was unacceptable. Under the quiet night sky, a desperate screech echoed across the estate as Rory found herself thoroughly cornered by their relentless questioning. The following morning, the estate grounds erupted into chaos as Noah furiously pursued the fleeing cat form Adam, shouting in absolute outrage. Noah harshly reprimanded the small demon for spilling unnecessary stories about his childhood to Saradius, while Adam desperately squeaked out that he had only given in because the girls lured him with the promise of a rare photograph. Meanwhile, Noah engaged in a quiet transaction on the side, smirking in satisfaction as a customer requested one of his exclusive items and expressed deep appreciation for its fine quality. Across a devastated battlefield, a defeated warrior collapsed onto the shattered earth, gasping in disbelief as Noah stood tall over the ruin. Trembling in awe and fear, the fallen fighter cried out the prince's name, realizing the absolute, undeniable power before him. Shortly after, a young woman burst into the room in a state of sheer panic, breathlessly announcing an urgent emergency that required Noah's immediate attention. Recognizing her as Theta, Noah greeted her with mild amusement, but she thrust a strange document toward him, insisting he look at it right away. He explained with grave concern that these ominous flyers have been mysteriously distributed all across the territory. The paper bore a dramatic manifesto claiming an intent to dye the world in darkness and summon an evil god under the name of Dark Noir Black Schwartz. Noah burst out laughing at the absurd proclamation, while Adam chimed in to mock the redundant name, noting that both words simply meant the same thing. Ada agreed that it sounded utterly ridiculous, expecting Noah to share her reaction, but paused when she noticed a sudden shift in his demeanor. His eyes flared with intense fury as he demanded to know where the flyers came from, prompting her to explain that a single hooded figure had handed them out near a nearby tower. As Noah immediately prepared to depart, Theta called out after him, offering to rally the Night Order to march alongside him. Turning back with a stern glare, he firmly cut her off before she could organize any troops. He commanded her to stay behind, declaring that he would personally deal with this threat alone. Theta gasped, wondering if this enemy was so formidable that even the knights stood no chance, to which Noah solemnly agreed. Swishing his cape dramatically, he warned that anyone else involved would surely perish, ordering them to remain at the castle while he handled it. She bowed her head in dejection, accepting his decision, while Adam quietly observed the prince's theatrical bravado with skepticism. Crushed by the belief that her knights were considered too weak to assist, Theta stood in shocked silence as Noah strode off into action. She realized there was no time left for tears or self-pity, resolving instead to warn everyone about the true, terrifying scale of the shadowy organization. Driven by a newfound resolve, she rallied her fellow knights, declaring that they would train relentlessly so as never to become a burden to their master again. Meanwhile, in a hidden hideout, hooded cultists of the Dark Noir Black Schwartz proudly proclaimed their lineage as followers of the ancient Dark Sage. Their masked leader raised his voice in exaltation, urging them to pool their strength to resurrect their great founder who vanished 2 millennia ago. The leader cackled with fanatical delight, confident that their grand design was finally coming to fruition. Without warning, a catastrophic strike shattered the earth around them, scattering the cultists in absolute chaos. Through the settling dust stepped Noah, confronting the shocked leader, who recognized him instantly as their ultimate adversary. Desperate, the masked leader clutched a glowing orb, declaring that Noah would meet his end right then and there. Magical relic flashed harmlessly with faint sparks, leaving the villain staring in utter bewilderment as nothing occurred. Cat-like companion calmly pointed out that the orb was doing absolutely nothing, making the villain panic in disbelief. Leader protested frantically, insisting their executives had prayed daily to this sacred strength-granting artifact, while the companion mocked his sudden loss of composure. Turned out the revered artifact was nothing more than an inexpensive decorative egg lamp ordered directly from a mail-order catalog. Scrambling frantically through an instruction manual for spell incantations, the villain was cut short as Noah coldly ordered the threat erased. Consuming flames began to engulf the manual and the cultist as he screamed in terror at the ominous power before him. Staring in utter dread at the overwhelming force standing over him, the defeated leader gasped, desperately asking who Noah truly was. He lunged forward with wide, frantic eyes, shouting at the cult leader to speak no further before any more secrets were spilled. Driven by sheer embarrassment, he declared his intent to completely wipe their memories clean on the spot, ignoring his knight's surprised outcry. As the cult leader shrieked in agony from the spell, the young prince buried his face in his hands, utterly overwhelmed by cringe. Meanwhile, the bewildered knight could only stand by in complete perplexity as the bizarre ordeal unfolded. Afterward, she questioned whether he had personally created those foolishly named syndicates, but he hastily turned away to deny the charge, stubbornly maintaining his innocence. He insisted that he would never engage in something so absurdly embarrassing. Pressed further about being their founder, he protested that those fanatics had merely idolized him on their own, attempting to gloss over the truth that in his past life as the great sage, he had penned a childish journal titled The Diary of Delusions, filled with dark overlord fantasies. Hearing this humiliating backstory, the white cat's sweat dropped in disbelief, while the former sage desperately defended himself, arguing that everyone experiences an embarrassing juvenile phase. Upon summarizing that the cultist had simply uncovered his 2,000-year-old diary and mistaken it for a holy doctrine, the prince grabbed his head in anguish, wailing over why his ancient dark past continued to haunt him. Standing dejected amid the shattered ruins, he listened as his small magical familiar casually remarked that being excessively powerful came with endless troublesome complications. Sometime later, within the opulent halls of the grand estate, a formidable gathering of influential noble women and powerful figures assembled together. Sweating in sheer terror, the small white cat realized with horror that all the most obsessed, high-ranking leaders of his master's fan club had gathered in one place. As the assembly convened to discuss the day's pressing agenda, Lady Sardius sat at the head of the chamber. In the absence of their young Lord Noah, she officially took command to guide the discussion. Addressing the gathered council with gravity, she questioned how they ought to deal with the fearsome organization known as Dark Noir Black Schwartz. Below her seat, the white magical cat collapsed to the floor, squirming in sheer agony over the absurdly dramatic title. Clutching his stomach in utter disbelief, the feline recalled yesterday's encounter, marveling at how anyone could utter such a ridiculous title with an entirely straight face. Nearby, Theta recounted with vibrant enthusiasm how their great hero Noah had acted immediately after being informed of the ominous flyers, taking on the dangerous assignment by himself to spare the Night Order from harm. Sardius solemnly added that he had single-handedly annihilated the enemy stronghold Nirine. In the background, the small cat silently acknowledged that the base had indeed been completely wiped out. Continuing her animated recounting, Theta quoted the prince's stern warning that everyone else was simply too weak for the conflict. Lista wondered if that truly applied, even if they mobilized the entire armed force of the Carter territory, while the cat quietly noted that he had merely meant for no one to follow him. He went on to dramatically convey his warning that a single mistake meant certain death, leaving Sardius stunned by the perceived danger of their foe. The feline companion, however, knew the true truth. The boy was merely terrified of dying from pure embarrassment over his childish past. Theta slumped in frustration, lamenting that their master was fighting such a sinister syndicate entirely alone while they did nothing but hold him back. Wiping away tears of gratitude and sorrow, Sardius and her fellow companion expressed how deeply indebted they were to him, lamenting their helplessness as mere spectators to his struggle. Suddenly breaking the mournful silence, Lista slammed her hands on the table and declared that there was no time for tears. She passionately insisted that they ought to be fighting by his side rather than standing idly by. She noted that ever since yesterday, the prince had locked himself away in his chamber to recover and prepare for the next battle, making it clear that it was now their turn to step up. Fired up by the speech, Theta joined in with absolute resolve, both of them vowing to grow stronger, stand up, and protect their master's back in the coming fight. Outside the grand estate, a powerful energy resounded as their unified pledge echoed to the skies for the glory of their lord. Inside, the magical cat sweated in pure terror, realizing with horror that two completely insane fanatical factions were now on a collision course to battle each other. As Theta charged down the corridor yelling for her lord, the frantic feline sprinted beside her, fully aware that the situation had devolved into absolute madness. She listened outside his door. The young prince loudly declared that he was locking himself away to reflect on his embarrassing past, refusing to listen to anyone. Frustrated by his stubbornness, the small white familiar threw its paws up in exasperation, recalling how a similar outburst had led to disaster once before. A few days later, he finally emerged from his self-imposed isolation, stepping out into the bright sunlight with a bewildered expression. To his utter astonishment, an enormous crowd had gathered outside, bearing a massive banner proclaiming their total devotion to him, flanked by his eager followers. Sweat dripping down his face, he turned to the cat familiar in sheer disbelief, begging for an explanation of what had transpired during his brief seclusion. Cat explained that while he had been brooding, the villagers had been trained into an unstoppable army by the four commanders to battle his fictional evil organization, leaving the young prince appalled by their incredible muscular transformations. Questioning who these so-called four rulers were, he learned they consisted of Theta, Ryza, Urian, and Hilda, who had taken leadership over the territory's forces. Posing triumphantly, the four heroines proudly declared their readiness to annihilate any shadowy syndicate or entire nation that stood in their path. Recognizing that this fanatical army had surpassed even royal forces, he realized he had to step in personally before the situation escalated any further. Stripping off his heavy outer coat, he flashed a confident smirk and announced that he would demonstrate a tiny fraction of his true power to quiet the crowd. A staggering surge of magical energy erupted from his body, baffling the commanders who mistook it for his maximum output, only for him to casually clarify that it was barely 1%. Watching the immense magic swell, the small familiar recoiled in sheer horror, screaming at the prince to question his sudden sanity. The sinister glint in his eyes, he boldly declared his intention to rewrite the very rules of the world, leaving the cat completely speechless. Unfathomable magical power burst forth into the sky, illuminating the heavens in a blinding flash of raw cosmic force. The ambient magic reshaped the atmosphere itself, sweeping across the realm as his world-altering spell took hold. Deep within a secluded, shadow-draped cave, a gathered assembly of cloaked figures stood in silence. Addressing the group, their masked leader expressed his gratification that none among them had abandoned their cause, declaring that the purpose of their gathering was to address the recent attack on their headquarters by Lord Noah. Went on to emphasize that the true extent of the man's power was something every single one of them needed to fear. With dramatic intensity, he proclaimed that the individual in question was none other than the reincarnation of the Dark Sage, Lord Noel. Exhorting his followers, he urged everyone to welcome Lord Noah with open arms, declaring that the moment had finally come to initiate their grand maneuver. Rousing the room into a passionate chant, the leader heralded a new age of darkness and rallied them to step out of the shadows and into the spotlight. Amidst the chanting, one member paused in complete bewilderment as a brilliant, glowing butterfly drifted softly past her face. Noticing her sudden silence, the leader turned toward her to ask what was wrong. Instead of offering a serious reply, she recoiled in genuine disgust, pointing at his mask and questioning why he was wearing something so absurd. Her reaction sent shockwaves through the group, prompting the leader and others to stare in total confusion at the strange behavior spreading among their ranks. Looking around blankly, she murmured in confusion, questioning who they were even talking to and denying the very name they called her. Panicking, the leader grabbed her shoulders, demanding to know why she was suddenly rejecting their dark organization and acting as though she knew nothing of their evil mission. Suddenly, the illusion shattered entirely across the hideout as members began complaining about the dim lighting, the tacky cloaks, and the bizarre tools cluttering their room. Stunned by the sudden collapse of their fanaticism, the leader reached out toward the luminous creature, realizing with horror that the butterfly was crafted entirely from pure magic. As the magical butterfly fluttered peacefully, he pieced together the terrifying truth. Someone had cast a high-level dark magic spell of mental interference, and only one person possessed that kind of power. The cult leader cried out in panic as glowing magical butterflies fluttered around him, asking if Noah was truly erasing their memories of him. Instantly, his grand, delusional purpose vanished, leaving him staring blankly into the distance and realizing he simply had to return to his mundane life working in the fields. Observing the far-reaching effects of his magic, Noah reflected on what modifying the world truly entailed as glowing spirits drifted off into the sky. He examined the spirit light in his hand, recognizing that the butterfly spirit's spell systematically wiped away all memories of his existence from everyone across the entire realm. Perched on his arm, the small white cat inquired if that meant absolutely no one in the world remembered him anymore, to which he quietly assented. Reflected on the vast scale of the erasure, having removed himself from the minds of the villagers, his allies, and everyone he had crossed paths with. Contemplating the outcome, he admitted to himself that life would be far simpler if no one knew who he was from the very start, though the cat looked at him with skepticism. He celebrated his newfound freedom with a sigh of relief, though his feline companion questioned what his true feelings were behind that assertion. Standing alone on the shoreline, he reaffirmed to himself that Lista and the others possessed no remaining memories of him, only to be suddenly interrupted by a voice rejecting his claim. With a radiant, affectionate smile, Rory declared that she still remembered exactly who he was, calling him her foolish partner and vowing to stay by his side until death. She leaned tenderly against him, reiterating her devotion and promising to follow him wherever his path might lead. Together, the pair walked side by side along the vast, tranquil beach, bound by their unbreakable connection. Suddenly, a crowd of familiar faces burst onto the beach, rushing toward him in high spirits and completely shattering his assumption of memory loss. Astonished and overwhelmed, he demanded to know why they were all here, while the group eagerly praised him for vanquishing the dark organization on his own. Rory looked on with a gentle smirk, revealing that he had tried to erase their memories to shoulder the fight alone and protect them, but their bonds proved far too strong to be forgotten. He looked on in total disbelief, desperately seeking clarification about whether their memories had truly been erased. The noblewoman calmly acknowledged that while the magic had indeed taken effect, something unexpected had occurred. She explained with a gentle smile that she had received a unique gift, one that granted her total recall of every single detail concerning him. Overwhelmed by this sudden turn of events, the young prince and his feline companion lamented the absurd turn of fate, despairing over his complete lack of privacy. The rest of the group gathered on the shore, noting how memory works in mysterious ways. They revealed that upon hearing the noblewoman speak, every forgotten moment came rushing back to all of them, prompting cheerful praise for her remarkable influence. She playfully attributed the miraculous recovery of their memories to the power of love. The small demon panicked beside her master, who covered his face in sheer exhaustion at the escalating situation. Their collective recollection threatened to transform his solitary sacrifice into legendary folklore, a grand tale of a selfless savior who fought a formidable organization in secret to preserve the realm's peace. As his companions exuberantly hailed him as the ultimate hero, he collapsed onto the sand in defeat, crying out at his backfiring plan while his journey with his loyal allies